1. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Offshore Live number 18 with one of my best buddies in the world and one of my heroes, John Coen and John Coen Sr. Thanks for coming in, guys.
Great to be here.
Feels like we just did this.
Yeah, I think we did it. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure, though. I already drank some rum.
Well, typically in Offshore Live fashion, we had technical difficulties 3 minutes in, so here we are. So we kind of started talking the first time around here about superboat and getting it off the ground. So where did you start with superboat?
I started in my garage with the 16. I brought the John Krause's book here. Those Eltros, nobody ever heard of them. It's one of those they built little wooden boats. A family runabout in those days was an 18-footer with like a 75 on it.
Right.
And they got involved with guys who wanted to build a race boat, and they played around. Gene Bianco ran around Long Island and won the whole race in a 17-foot Eltro with a pair of 100s on it.
Right.
And everybody said, "What the hell is this 17-foot boat? Winning world champion, winning races." They played around a while. They switched to fiberglass, and they were waiting for the money that was going to come, supposedly. See, George Linda, who was involved with them at the time, said, "Oh, we're going to take this company public, and then we're going to build all kinds of boats." They were playing around building fiberglass boats, and they had never done it. And I was working at a sailboat place then when I was learning how to do fiberglass, because I was planning on building boats, but I'd never built a boat yet. Like my mother said, "You never built a boat, you don't have any money." "I'll figure this out, Mom."
Well, that's the criteria for getting involved with boats.
Yeah. So they went out of business, and I'd been bugging them, and they had a 16 there that had been running an OPC boat, and it delaminated. It was laying out there, and they said, "Well, I wanted to buy the boat. I was going to fix it up and use it, because the bottom was delaminated, but it was cored, so the boat was still there.
Right.
It just didn't have the outside skin." So I bought the boat and was laying around, and they went out of business. I said, "Here's our chance. I'm going to start in the boat business with this boat." Fixed it up and made the molds and started making those boats. But I wasn't building the right boat for the time, because at that time all the small boat guys had hydro steamers and stuff. They were all going for speed.
Right.
I was going for a boat you could run in the Great South Bay.
Right.
Like here, the same as here. You go out in the bay, it's ugly out there.
Yeah.
The hydro stream guys don't even go out.
Right.
So I wanted to build a boat you could do that in, so it wasn't fast, and we never really sold a lot of them. When I made a set of console out of it, I made hundreds of them.
Right.
Then I got a little money, and I went to the 24 and got out into a shop and started making the 24. And at that time, if you remember, early 70s, there was no real stern drives. There was a little tiny stern drive, but there was nothing. Guys built boats with Volvos, with a handmade motor. And, we're playing with old jet drives. I did them with 455 Olds jet motors in the 24. We tried everything. But in beginning in 75, at the boat show, the 280 TRS was there. That was like, they say time and everything matches.
That was like a spaceship?
That was the boat motor for that boat.
Right.
So I immediately called Mercury and got an OEM and ordered a motor, and it reminds me of today, because I ordered the motor in January and I got it in August. Went to the first race, the Brass Monkey Marathon down here. Now, they had crazy boats in the class. I got third against guys with big inboards and all kinds of stuff, but I was hooked for sure then.
Right.
So the next year, I built one with the 280 TRS and came to the Benihana. First race with a boat I built. Got first in class, third overall.
Nice.
When I got there, I got a one-day membership. They said, "Well, we can't." That's when, remember the awards dinners down here?
Yeah.
200 people, 300 people. You couldn't get in the building. They said, "Well, we won't get you to dinner." I said, "That's okay. I'll pick up the trophy from the back of the room." Everybody left. I came back. They were yelling, "Where you been? We got a table for you right in front of the stage. You got first in your class, third." And they used to give you all kinds of contingency money and the whole deal. I walked out of there with $6,000.
Right.
I said to my wife, "This boat racing shit might not be bad." Paid for the boat in one race. That was the last time that ever happened.
Uh-huh.
But by then I was in, it was We had to do it. The kids were small. We were coming to all the races. And then I decided, well, the classes, I got to build a bigger boat. So we pieced together, actually glassed together pieces of 224s and made the 30. And actually ran one with a wooden deck on it, a pair of whatever the motors were then, I think, 225s.
235s, right?
No, that was Johnson Evinrude.
Right. The 2 thirsty fives.
Yeah. Which ran good, but you couldn't keep them on the boat in rough water. They ripped everything apart.
And what was up? There was something funny with them too, where you couldn't turn them lock to lock. The engine cowlings would hit each other and stuff.
Well, you
right?
had to space them in the right spot, which was out here somewhere. I don't even know where it was.
Right.
But the boat ran so good, it just like it does today. I just, it's one of those things, you glass two boats together, and holy crap, it works.
Right.
And the boat ran so good from then on, we started winning everything, everything. And as the power went up, things changed. Got the single engine boats, and that boat still today, it always amazes me. Made that boat in 79. And there's still really nothing in that class that'll run with that boat. When the water gets ugly, that skinny boat is the only boat to be in.
It's like a knife through butter, man.
It just...
I happen to have the good fortune of being on a race course with quite a few of your boats, and had the good fortune of trying to catch a few of your boats. And they do run, man. I mean, even look at Specialized. It's probably one of your older boats on the course, right?
Yeah.
And
I had a while there where I had a few dealers, and that boat was sold to a guy up in Massachusetts. Well, he built one. He went to Florida for the World Championships. Remember those old 2.5s? The fuel injection ran all the time.
Right.
Went back to the tank when it wasn't going. So the boat caught on fire. They jumped overboard. Meanwhile, the pump is running, pumping gas into the boat and into everywhere. Well, it burned to the water line. That boat went in the dumps in Key West. That's what they took the motors and stuck them and put that... but he bought another boat, and that's the boat that's Specialized now. He bought it from them.
Right. So now, 1979, you're building 24s, 30s, 16s. When did the 21 come in?
21 came in about the same time because they started... The kid, Hank Cole, that had the money invested in Challenger was a young guy. He was a boat freak. He came to work for me, and he worked for me for a while, and then he got hooked up with George Linda to finance that whole 21 deal, which you got to give the guy credit for that. There's still no real 21 that'll run with that boat.
No, and I'll test to that.
He just hit it. The design of the boat and the shape and everything just worked.
Yeah.
But they were spending more money than they were making, and they weren't making their own actual hull and deck. They had a regular fiberglass company laying those boats up. And they weren't really knowing what they were doing with core and all, and the sides would peel off. And you have all that happen. You got dealers wanting boats. Meanwhile, one comes in with the side gone.
Right. Now, at that time, is this hearsay or rumor, was that Jack at Hydrotech laying his stuff up? Is that who that was?
No, a regular fiberglass guy that did anything and everything
Okay.
was laying those boats up.
Right. So then from when Challenger designed that and put their version out, how did you wind up with your 21? Was that a variant of the Challenger, or was that the Challenger
That
mold?
was the original molds because Hank Cole had the money invested, and his accountant told him, look, this business looks a little shaky. They want to build another set of molds. I recommend that you own them and lease them to the company.
Right.
So when they fell behind on, the old government, when they come along, boy, they were behind. They had regular straight company with everybody on the books, and they owed a pile of money in withholding tax from the employees.
Right.
They came and put the lock on the door. Bang, done.
Right.
But the set of molds that he owned, he could get out of there. So he called me up, and he says, I'm not happy with this whole deal with George Linda. I want to make sure, because he was putting together, he got hooked up with Elby then, Cronenberg, and he's the guy that came and bought the molds at the auction. But Hank Cole said, I want you to get this mold. I'll sell it to you now, so George Linda can't get it.
Right.
So that's how I got the 21, $5,000. I ran down there and had those molds out of his building, and back in my building a week later, we made the boat for Larry.
Right.
The guy who gave me the $5,000.
$5,000
to buy the molds.
That's one hell of an investment. Looking back, huh?
Yeah. Well, the bigger joke is we were selling the boats for $5,000 at that time. Guy says, "You remember what I paid for that?" I hear that all the time. The guy, guys slip out of performance and back 20, 30 years later, they call for a 21 or a 24. We used to sell 24s for, $10,000 with a motor.
Right. You ain't buying headers for that now.
The guy says, "You're not buying a gas tank. I don't know what you're buying." I knew I should have kept that 24. It was the money, the whole joke, those 21s and 24s, a regular young guy could come in and buy that boat and be riding around for $6,000 or $7,000.
Right. In a boat that would put up respectable speed numbers.
Yeah. They got, by then you had the motors at 225s and stuff. Those boats were getting 70 miles an hour.
Yeah. Well, and so it's hard to put your finger on what boat you're probably most famous for. Like there's a lot of those 21s around.
Oh yeah, well everybody decided they were going to copy one.
Right. Well, not just that. I mean, there's a lot of your 21s.
Oh yeah. Well, we were making those days. The boats were simple. Everything was simple. We were making a boat every 2 weeks. Then.
Well, I know of one of yours for sale right now, squeaky clean for like $55,000. I mean, they held their value. They're still one of the best single-engine 21s there is. Now, when you got the mold from Challenger, the one big difference that you can see between your 21 and theirs is the deck. Did you make your own deck?
No, the deck is identical.
Really?
That was.
You did the liner.
We had a molded liner. But the guy, Elby, when he took the molds and made was the next boat? Challenger? Shadow. They made the new deck.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That had the molded windshield.
Hang on 1 second. Hang on, I can't hear John.
Yeah, maybe
No?
pull your mic up a little bit. Yeah.
Is it me or is his...
Try talking.
You good?
Yep. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, we're back. So that's what I was looking at one of yours right before you walked in, and obviously I walk past that Challenger we got every day, and it just seems like your 21 has more of like a rounded, nice feature line to it, where the Challenger's still boxy.
No,
it's not.
I am
different?
actually using that original mold still to this day.
Really, because it doesn't seem it. It's funny when you look at them. There's something off about it.
Yeah, well, they made the bump up on the deck to fit the windscreen on the Shadow.
Yeah,
That
the
was
Shadow.
difference.
See, the Shadow. I had that handrail on the 24. I guess they like that. Challenger.
Right.
So when they made their boat, it looked like it was my boat because it had the same exact stainless steel handrail around it, everything the same.
Right.
So when I made it, it looked like, oh, you made it just like the 24. No, they made it just like the 24, and I just bought it back.
Right.
No, the 21.
The 21 and the 24, I made the deck the same with the handrail around it. When the next guy bought it, they made the windshield thing.
Right.
So but really, I don't think they changed anything on the deck except the spot where the windshield sits.
Okay. Right.
The crown and the deck is all.
Right.
It's
They
all
didn't
the
have
same.
liners in them either.
No, they didn't have a cockpit
They had the
liner.
wooden floor.
So you had a wooden floor and carpet and all that, and
Right,
everybody
right.
gets tired of that. So that was the first thing I did, though, was make a liner.
Right. So it's just gradually moving through it. It's funny. You rarely see people knock it out of the park more than once, right? Like somebody comes out with something that's real nice and it's cool, but then the predecessors usually aren't anywhere near that first home run, Looking at your line, I mean, it seems like you just kept knocking it out of the park all the way to today.
And the joke is, I wish I could claim the credit. The 30 is the only boat I could really say I built from scratch.
Right.
All the other boats I bought. The
Right.
24 was a little guy in a backyard somewhere called P&D. Mm-hmm. They started making those boats. Nobody knew it, still at the time when there wasn't really an engine for that boat. But I got the boat from them for like $1,700. Thank God you weren't using it.
Right.
Because when you stepped on the bottom and went like that, the gas tank was under the floor, was a 2x4 nailed on the string on each side, keeping it from slipping back. I said, that'd be good when you were running along. The glass work was terrible, but I didn't even know it at the time, and nobody really did because at that time, like I say, there weren't really engines, And nobody was really doing what that 24 was capable of doing until the power started coming up and the stern drive.
Right.
See, the first guys, the story I got, the first guys that built 24s had V drives in them. Because like when I started racing in the 60s, all the boats had V drives. And it lifted that stern too much, and the boat didn't want to handle, and it kind of got pushed to the side like, forget about it. And somebody dug it out and said, we ought to try making one of these. And that boat, I mean, every guy that ever owned it says, I never should have sold that boat.
Right. Well, it's cool because even trailing all the way to today, where the Y2K is as dominant as it is, it's just really awesome and a testament to your company over the years. I mean, I know you can't claim maybe the
just
design.
dumb luck.
Well, and maybe you can't claim the design credit, okay? But the workmanship involved in your boats. I mean, most of them are still out there running.
Well, you know, that was one of the things when I started in the beginnings. Guys said, you know, you're doing too much of this. You're doing. I said, I'm making these boats that my name's on them. When there's a problem, they're going to come to me. It's not a big company. I don't say, some guy in the back of the shop screwed up, you know. So I always, right from the beginning, when we made the first 16s, you could see through them.
Right.
Because if you don't gel coat anything on the inside of a boat, and it's got one layer of matte roving on the sides and two on the bottom, you can see through the boat. So I figured I'm going to start out light, and if they break, you figure out why.
Right.
Don't make a tank and say, well, it doesn't break here, but it doesn't go.
Right.
So when we started
I know that program very well.
Everybody, you see in the beginning, you got to remember, in the early 70s, fiberglass was still new stuff. They didn't know how thick. Eltro was making the 16s when I was down there. And I said, what are you guys doing? How thick you making the bottom of that boat? Well, the bottom of the wooden boat was ½ inch. So we figured we'll make the fiberglass ½ inch. I said, no, stop. And they would lay up, and at 4 o'clock when it's time to go home, they were in the middle layup, they'd stop.
You guys must have wore drill bits out like they were going out of style.
Oh, it was all crazy. They'd stop laying the layup, and they start the next day.
Right.
So they had a lot of delamination problems.
Right, scheduling.
And the same thing that happened with Challenger. The guys were making those boats. They would stop and go the next day. So that's why they had all kinds of problems with boats delaminating. I try to explain it, but, you know, who am I? Joe
Right.
Schmo, nobody. You know nothing.
Well, one thing that I can take some credit for is your R&D department. I pushed a few of yours to the test.
Everybody did. I mean, it's funny because at the time, Steve Staton, who was one of the first guys that built a boat with a big motor, we were working on Ted Zeus's boat in the factory parking lot. Now, he's one of the guys that built the first one that was fast with a jet drive. We had a Berkeley jet in that boat, but he had money. Flagship Marine, they built, I don't know, it was probably 400 horsepower. So that boat went a little over 70 miles an hour.
Right.
Which guys were like, impossible.
Right. Crazy numbers. For
Crazy
that. Yeah.
numbers, 70
76.
miles an hour.
Yeah, and that was like in 76.
No, that was before that. That was like in 75, 70.
Right.
Ted got the first boat. The first 24. We almost didn't have superboats at all because we were in such a hurry. That's even a better story. He's a friend of mine for years, since we were 12 years old. We're building the boat. He's down there helping me. So we laid up the glass on the transom. We had some of the pipe on the front of the boat, and we laid up the transom, and we're like, we'll start welding it on now. Yeah, you know how that worked, right? The back of the boat went on fire. Flames to the ceiling in the shop. This is the end of superboats right here, and the building.
You didn't even get started yet.
You got a fire extinguisher? No. You got a hose? No.
It's cold. Hose is frozen.
Didn't have one. Didn't even have a hose bib. We ran in and got a couple of wet towels, and we got them laying on the back of the mold and got the fire out and cleaned up quick because then the fire department showed up and said, was a fire? No, there was no problem here. The guy's looking at the black spot in the ceiling. It's a brand new building. We became friends. The guy who owned the building became like friendly with me because the first year I didn't pay him any rent. You know, you gonna pay me rent in the spring? Okay, John.
Got to know him well.
If it wasn't for people like that trusting you.
Right.
He says, a brand new building. What's that black spot in the ceiling? Wow, I don't know. That was there. We moved in.
It's mold. You got a leak in your
Black
roof.
mold. It's gonna kill you. So that was almost the end of the business right there. Burnt the whole place down and going home. You know, that was Ted and I still laugh about that. He ended up buying a 30 later. You know, it's just the things that happen when you. We'll weld it on now. It'll be no problem.
So your 1980s is when, in the mid 80s, you changed the deck on the 30. Is that when you?
No, that wasn't until the
2000,
90s.
99.
Really?
Y2K.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't there two models of the 30 outboard? Like Specialized, for instance, there was a newer deck and an older deck.
No.
No, well, you made the insert piece that went.
We made a different piece for the back for a well or an IO or a well.
Right,
But its
right.
deck was the same.
Okay, and the IOs, it's funny. I didn't know that you made them in IO. Everyone I'd ever
The first
seen.
ones were all IOs.
Well, only ones I've ever seen were outboards. So funny enough, flipping through some pictures here before you guys got here, I found a couple of those on the internet, and they were really cool. So the issue was, and it's funny, I've never heard somebody bring this up, but there just wasn't available power packages. I didn't realize the disadvantage there. You know, I just assumed that
Well,
horsepower.
there wasn't a single. That's all the early ones had twin small blocks.
Well, no. What I mean is that the power just wasn't there. Like, I hadn't realized, thinking about it, until the late 70s, you didn't have available stern
Right.
drives and horsepower, and I had never realized
Oh, no.
that.
Well,
That's what
why-
I said with the jet drives. The first boats had Berkeley jets. They had Volvos with a worked small block like a 350, you know, 70-mile-an-hour boats. But you think about it, at that time, in rough water, that was a fast boat in rough water.
Right.
Like we came down here and raced in Barnegat Bay.
Oh,
That boat just ate that up.
Oh,
there.
and no doubt. And people, it's funny. I probably explain this more than anything else. People come up to me and they go, "So, in all these years, you guys haven't figured out how to go any faster," you know? And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" You know, they watch these old boat race videos and they get these guys, you know, "Oh, they're doing 95 miles an hour," and I'm thinking to myself, they were doing 60, 65, you know, and
50. I think the year I won the Benihana, I probably, if I did 50
right.
and came in first class, third overall in the whole race.
Right.
Well, you got to remember, see, the big thing that nobody remembers, they had to do something to get spectators.
Right.
Those races, you took off.
everyone got lost.
Right.
Everybody went,
They were
you know,
spiraling in
well, like the pictures I brought, family pictures. We were a boat family.
Right.
I had a chart in front of me when I was 12 years old. My father showed me, now you see how you lay out the course, you see how you keep your heading. You know, I knew all that. When you came to these races, if you didn't navigate, well, the famous one was the guy said, "I think we went too far. They're at Fire Island Inlet. We were supposed to turn around
From Manasquan.
we were supposed to turn around at Asbury."
They see the Robert Moses water tower.
Yeah.
You went a little
and then
too
they,
far.
"Oh, that's Fire Island Light." Well, we know where we are now. We're only about 50 miles past where, you know, the race was to Asbury Park.
Right.
You're supposed to make a left and go down the beach. Nah, we just keep going till we see a boat. So those races were navigation. Guys,
Right.
I mean, you know the layout here.
Right.
We ran down the beach to Seaside to the pier, right? You made a left to a sea buoy that on any day but a really nice day, you couldn't see the shore.
Right.
So you had to find that buoy, make sure they saw your number, and make a left and head for Asbury Park.
Right.
The whole run, most days, you couldn't see the land. You
Right.
couldn't see anything. Guys went off out
Yeah,
there.
because that was July, the haze back in those
Yeah,
days.
guys went to Europe, I think. I don't know where they
Right.
went. We made up, Jimmy Nolan, who ran with me then, we sat down, we said, we're just going to run our race. Because when you're a new guy, you think the guy in the open boat, he must know where he's going. Bullshit. He has a less idea than you do.
Right.
So we said, we're going to run the course. We're going to do our headings. If we, you know, time and distance, we should be at a buoy. Instead of driving, we would stop. And you think it's on the left or on the right? I think it's on the left. Yeah, you find it. You take the next heading. You drive your own race. You'd be going along, and a guy open boat go by going the other way. Now, new guys would say, "We must be lost. Follow him."
Right.
Oh, he's so lost. He's going to Florida.
Right.
So we won. Those races were all navigation and having the boat stay together.
Right.
Because every class ran 100 miles.
Right.
So you took off, and when you came back, if they waved the checkered flag at you, I guess we won.
Right.
Guys never knew.
Right.
When you look up the statistics, we had 100 boats down here. Sometimes 20 or 30 of them saw them finished.
Right.
Broke down, lost, decided to just, I don't know where we are, let's go home.
Sunk, never make it back on the trailer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Tom Adams.
Yeah.
Remember that story?
Of course, yeah.
Came with his big new fancy wootsy boat. It's still out there.
Right.
Guys went looking for that for a long time, too.
Right.
Couldn't divers out there, couldn't find it. It was brand new.
Right.
Brand new. Went home with an empty trailer. That's embarrassing when you're a boat manufacturer.
Right.
Try never to do that.
Now, what was the, and I ask everybody this, what was the real cool factor of that style of racing? I mean, was it just the feat, like the overall feat of running that far, finding where you were going, tracking yourself, plotting yourself? Was it everything, or was there any one thing that was really cool?
I think it was the whole deal.
Right.
I mean, I was a boat guy. And when I got involved with my stepfather, see, he was a car dealer. And he was making some money. I was living in Westport then. I could water ski in my backyard. That's how cool we were.
Right.
And he was talking about building a race car. I said, let me think about this. You're going to drive around, and I'm going to crawl around under it. No. So they went on vacation one time in Florida when the race used to leave from the DuPont Plaza Hotel there, right on the Miami River. And they walked over there and saw these boats. So he came back. He says, they race these boats in the ocean. What was my first question? How many people can ride in the boat?
Right.
He says, in those days, you look through the pictures, they got 4 guys, 5 guys hanging
Right.
around. You got guys hanging off the stern because
Yeah.
the road better. I mean, it's just crazy world.
Right.
I said, fine, let's build a boat.
Right.
So we came down here, like I said earlier. We went to
Yeah, that was in the 60s, right?
Yeah, 60,
Yeah.
early 64, 5. So then we came down. We met the guys from Holman and Moody. I don't know how many people know that whole story. Holman and Moody was big-time NASCAR at the time. And Aaron or somebody got a hold of them and said, why don't you build a special motor for race boats? So they did. 15-quart oil pan, 2 oil filters, freshwater cooled. Which my first question as a kid was, heat exchangers on the front of the motor like this.
Right.
If you've ever seen one of them. It was the 427 side oil, the famous motor.
Right.
They built this thing to run in a race boat with the throttle down for 100 miles.
Right.
Just don't worry about it, but don't screw with it.
Right,
Don't screw
right.
with that motor. So he came to the little guy down here. Fiber was making a V-hull family boat. We cut the sides down. They made us a hull. We put a wooden deck on it and made the boat. Went to Holman and Moody, showed him the boat. I stopped by on the way up. Stopped in Charlotte to show him the boat. I said, yeah, we'll sell you a motor. Gee, thanks. $7,000.
That's big money at that time.
The Corvette with that motor in it.
Right.
You could have bought. They
Well,
should have bought the car.
He was a Lincoln Mercury dealer. You could actually, at the time, you could buy a Comet GT drag race car, set up for the track, with that motor in it for $5,000.
Right.
I said we should have bought 50 of them, because now imagine what they'd be worth.
Right.
But that Holman and Moody was, I don't know whatever happened that they went out of the business, but for a while everybody had those motors.
Right.
Everybody had those motors. It was like this motor we're building now, have now supposedly. You just ran the motor. Don't touch the motor, because if you touch the motor, we don't want to talk to you.
Right.
It ran and ran and ran. He brought the boat down here one day, parked in the driveway. Somebody stole it.
Oh.
They didn't steal it for the boat. They stole it for that motor.
Right.
Gone. Never to be seen again.
Right.
But that boat had a V-drive in it. But it went like low 50s, which people, that was fast.
That's fast. Yeah. Well, and especially the one thing that nobody really talks about is propeller technology.
Well,
There was no such thing.
We had an eyebrow propeller on there in Miami Key West race. Jim Wynn drove away from us like our anchor was dragging. You've seen pictures of that boat, Ghost Rider. But we were doing fine. It was a little rough, right? You're winging it every time.
Right.
Bing! Blade, you come off.
Right.
And it wouldn't have been bad because I was in good shape in those days and was doing a lot of diving then. I had a puller and everything in the boat. So I managed to hold my breath enough to get the propeller off and get a new one on there.
Right. Well,
But
and that's
it had
another
whipped.
thing.
It had whipped the end of the shaft when I went off.
Right.
So we finished the race, but, everybody was drunk at the party by the time we got in.
Right.
But, I was really hooked by then. There was no way in hell you would have had to kill me to stop me from getting in the boat racing business.
Right. And what's cool is, though, in those days, you had probably 25, 30 other boats to run against at any given race, right?
Oh, yeah, it was a lot. If you look in the book, there was crazy. Guys had it was the idea times. We'll do this, it'll work, that'll do that. Family cruisers with 2 monster diesels in them. 5 guys hanging around the cockpit that looked like they were out for cocktails.
Right.
And they had crazy races. I don't know if you ever heard of the Bahamas 500. You went out for days from island. You had to be the real money guys. We didn't go on that. I mean, imagine the cruise you had to have meeting you and
Right.
keep that boat running for 500 miles in water that nobody knew where you. Talk about nobody
Right.
knowing where you're going.
Right. Well,
Off in your navigation there, you end up on a coral reef somewhere.
Well, I was talking when I had Billy Martin and Charlie McCarthy in here. I was asking them a bit about the Bahamas races. And to me, the most nerve-wracking thing, I've done it. We took my old man's 34 Scarab Super Sport, and we went from Jupiter Inlet to the Abacos. It was like 340 miles.
Yeah.
And so we
You
went
made that in one run?
Yeah, we went straight out.
How much gas?
Quite a bit. But that boat's got, I think it holds 300 gallons, and it's got 525s in it, so it rolls pretty far.
Now these guys, they try to put enough gas in those boats, in these big outboard boats, because they don't like buying gas out there.
Yeah.
So they got 1,000, 1,500 gallons of
Yep.
these things to go cruising the
And now,
Bahamas.
we did the same thing. We were a little nervous. But from doing that run, the one thing that was scaring me was you never knew if it was 30 foot deep or 3 feet deep because the water's so
water's
clear.
salty,
yeah.
So they're really, unless you spend a lot of time.
You had to be what they call dead reckoning. And if you don't reckon right, you're dead.
Right. So
You had to steer a course and stick. That was the whole. That was probably the thing that broke everybody in the real offshore racing. I don't care what it feels like. Go on the chart, stick to your navigation.
Right.
It doesn't feel right. I don't care if it doesn't feel right. Steer it, because out there especially, that doesn't feel right. Go that way. The water's this deep.
Right.
And cut the bottom out of the boat like
Right.
a razor.
Well, and you're not running through sand. I mean, it's
Oh,
coral and rocks.
And
yeah.
who's going to come help you?
Right.
You're 100 miles from everybody.
Right. The only people that made out on that deal was the Bohemians.
Yeah, right. Yeah, when they took your boat back and made a fishing boat
And
out of
took the
it.
jewelry off you.
Yeah, with your bodies.
But that's what got me was, like, they were saying there was certain guys that would, go out there and hire a navigator that knew the islands, but those guys were all able to be on a take too.
Well, not only that, the ego of this sport. I don't need no freaking navigator.
Right.
Like the famous story of a guy down the street. His first boat was a 50-foot Sea Ray. He tells the guy, they say, we got a captain take you out. I can figure that out. The next weekend, it was sitting outside Kismet on a sandbar like this, with the struts pushed through the bottom of the boat. I'll have it and of course, he was such a brainchild. He said, I'll have it back next weekend, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, sure.
Some people don't want to. Again, if you know how to, if you take a guy who really knows how to lay out a course, he can be in some place he's never been in his life. If he does it right and sticks to it and doesn't go, I think that's where we should be. Yeah, time and distance don't tell us we're there.
Right.
You can drive anywhere. You can go anywhere.
So was there any kind of, and I don't necessarily understand all the layouts of the organization back then, but was there any help from whoever was putting on the race? Like, was there an issued chart? Like,
Yes.
this is, okay, so everybody
Yes,
had the same charts.
That and the thing that they always try to do, the turns, offshore turns, were at a buoy,
Okay,
a sea buoy,
Right.
that you know
is there.
is there. So
Right.
when you're laying out the chart, you could lay your heading out to that buoy on the chart.
Right.
Not just some spot in the middle of the ocean.
Well, and kind of funny, when I was talking to Charlie, he was telling me a story about, I believe it was the 1977 Argentina race. And he said Billy Martin was maybe, I don't know,
Yeah, it's probably in that book.
25, 30 miles
Off.
ahead, right? And so he gets to where the turn is, and he's driving around all these fishing boats, which this is supposed to be the turn, and nobody knows nothing.
Yeah.
Nobody, hey, how you doing, and they speak Spanish, he don't speak, so he's
And
like,
they
I
think
guess
you're
I'm
all a
lost.
bunch of lunatics running through their fishing fleet.
Well, according to Billy, that was the marker, but they didn't want Bounty Hunter to win that day. And so, like, how much of that was there any of that really, was that prominent, or was that just like something that?
No, because there was always a turnboat at the buoy. There had to be, because they had to know you were there.
Right.
So it was a real boat. It had a flag up. And besides, those around here, those offshore buoys, there was usually no spectators out there.
No.
Who the hell's going to run
Nobody's
20
going
miles
out there.
offshore? They sat right here
Right.
on the beach.
Right.
So that was never a problem.
Right.
We weren't trying to do the turns at 100 either, because it didn't matter.
Right.
You'd slow down almost off plane, make sure they got the number, wave at them, okay, and take off on your next heading.
Right.
Because most of the time, especially with me, there was nobody else there but me.
Right.
Everybody else had already, by the second turn, everybody else was already lost.
Right.
The open boats were gone, wherever they went.
Now, did you know, like, when you came to a checkpoint, was there anybody there telling you were in third or you were in
No.
fifth? So you were just running.
They never knew anyway.
Right. Right. So,
When you came in and they said, you're like first class, start over on the whole race. Of course, everybody went to the paperwork. How could this guy be there?
right.
But everybody wrote down your number in a book, and when they came back, I was at every turn right there where I was supposed to be.
Right.
Couldn't take it away from me, even if
Such
they
a
wanted
wild
to.
world. See, to me, like, when I look back at what would be the cool factor, like, we race what we do today, right? And I look back and I think it must have just been so cool to be a part of the Wild West. Like, you talk about the 60s, the 70s, there were no rules. There was no, there was structure in boat racing. That's not what I mean. But, like, how did you get your boat together? Where'd you get the parts from? Where'd you get
Well,
it must
yeah.
have been.
And especially in the early days, you look at pictures in there, guys were putting together, they were dreaming up, let's do this. Nobody else is doing this. You look at some of the boats in there, they're 40-foot family cruisers that they just dumped 2 monster motors in.
Right.
Well, bolted 9 out, 100 horsepower.
Well, that was the biggest joke. You talk about multiple outboards. There were a few then. The biggest joke was a guy, and he came to the races for a few years. He had like 6 60-horsepower Scott outboards on the back of the boat.
Yeah, use what you got.
I guess he figured, with this many motors, a few of them got to be running.
I got to finish.
I don't think the guy ever finished. I really don't think he ever finished. But he was there all the time. Well, remember, that was the time that the 100 was out. So you had guys with 4 100s, especially from Florida.
Right.
Because down there, they were all playing, let's do this, let's do that.
Right.
And they came with 4 100s. Some of them never finished. You got 4 motors. You couldn't keep them all running.
Right.
You come back towed in anyway.
Right. Was the power relatively reliable back then, or?
You always thought it was till you went to a boat race. Like an outboard motor. You think about it.
So it's the same as today.
You buy a family outboard motor. Yeah. You buy a family boat. You put 100 horsepower on the back of it. You ride around forever, right?
Right.
As soon as whatever it is, the beating in the boat and the
Yeah.
race and all that, just...
There's something different about actually doing it.
Yeah, the beating. I
Yeah.
guess it's the beating that stuff takes, especially then. When you're young, a beating ain't a beating.
Yeah, whatever. You walk right through that.
You jump out of the boat and say, "Where's the ball? For God's sake, I'm dying of thirst here."
Not anymore, man.
And you ran the boat. Remember, we ran 100 miles
Right.
in that 24-foot, and those guys run them 21-footers. You went out there and ran that boat 100 miles.
Right.
Because if you didn't, obviously you didn't win anything because
Right.
you missed a buoy somewhere or wherever the hell you went. And the killer, I raced in an open boat twice. A friend of mine got involved with this guy, Peter King, and he had the identical boat to Betty Cook. The all-out, no-expense Scarab with the Mercury fuel-injected race motors with, new motors all the time. I rode in that boat 2 races. The boat only went 72 miles an hour. You had all that. He was only going 10 miles an hour faster than me. Of course, it's in the ocean.
But it would do it all day long.
Yeah, their problem was they got lost all the time. That's why they had me in the boat.
I assume you helped that program.
Yeah. It was just, the problem was, of course, another thing I never figured out. They didn't have gas gauges in those boats. You figured some time and then you flipped the valves
Right.
to change to the other tank. I'm like, how many things can I watch here? Because the
Right.
guy driving the boat was like, I got plenty of money.
Uh-huh.
And, we started out here at the Benihana one year. And right at the start, he drove behind a cat.
Uh-huh.
A river flew into the boat. In the first 5 minutes, Joey's yelling. I don't know if you ever heard of Joey Detour. He's yelling in the microphone. That's the last thing I heard in the microphone. No! As the water came over the top of the boat. Everything went dead. So now we got no more communication.
Right.
You're pointing at him. Joey's smacking him. Peter, turn that way. But he had the money, and he wasn't afraid to yell about it because he worked for Yves Saint Laurent then. Remember the jean deals?
Calvin Klein was his big,
No, Yves Saint Laurent, same kind of deal. Jeans with the embroidery in the pockets, all $200 in Macy's, right. Well, this guy, Peter King, was hooked up with them, and he was going to China and buying like 500,000 pairs of jeans. And we raced in Detroit, and he's on the phone back to whoever he talked to. He says, I beat those chinks to death today. Boy, I got them. He says, I got 500,000 pairs of jeans for $6.50. And I got them to throw the embroidery on the back pockets for free. So they were buying him anything he wanted.
Right.
So they were paying for everything in the boat. So we went tested the boat and came back, and neither motor's running right. He called Mercury, says, I don't know what you guys are doing today. I'm in Detroit. I want 2 new motors in the boat in the morning. Yes, sir, Mr. King. They drove all night. And I'll tell you what, there were 2 motors in that boat in the morning.
Right.
Whatever you say.
That's one thing that I get very jealous about when I hear like the manufacturer wars, like of whether it be OMC or Mercury or Johnson or Evinrude or the right now or at least the boat racing that I grew up in is a dominated Mercury market.
Yeah.
Which I am equally as appreciative of. Mercury makes great stuff, but it must have been so cool to see the development of that and see, the ideas bouncing back and forth and who did what right. And
Well, you got to remember, one thing that made Mercury what Mercury was. Who was that? The old man Kike.
Yeah.
That guy, he was not there to get beat. In anything he did, you see pictures of him when they raced a Mercury car in Daytona with Mercury written on the side of it. I mean, they won shit. I mean, this guy wasn't in anything to play games. So when he started in the race and stuff, OPC and all that, you knew they were going to be winning because the old man said, I don't care how much money it costs. We're going to do the design. They had Lake X. They sat guys out there jumping in and out of the boat.
right, I remember
Just put
that.
it to the wood and ride around in a circle.
Right.
They had a gas boat to pull up alongside of it, put gas in it, another guy get in, drive for another 4 or 5 hours.
We'll find that video and put it in. There's a really cool video of that just a couple years they put out. I think it was 72 straight hours of wide open throttle or
Yeah,
something.
they ran until the motor broke, and then
Yeah.
they'd say, okay, now let's find out what's wrong with it.
But they would have guys in there on like 8-hour shifts
Oh,
and
yeah.
run like a new boat out and drop a driver in, and the other guy would jump out.
It sounds cool, but then you think about it. You ever been to Lake X?
It's tiny.
It's a little
You
late.
get dizzy.
I went around it twice. I said, this is enough of this. You think about it. Oh, boy, I got a cool job. I'm driving the Mercury test boat.
Right.
Around in this circle.
It's like going up
7
and down.
hours.
It's like when my old man bought me a boat when I was a kid, but I wasn't allowed to leave the lagoon.
Yeah, I only went up and down Great River when I was a kid 8,000 times a day in my little 8-foot racing pram. And then I started staying at night. That's when I went from the daytime to the nighttime because there was more going on at night than there was in the daytime.
Yeah, no doubt. Especially up there in Strong Island.
Yeah. Well, that's when you started kissing girls on the Vanderbilt's estate front lawn, Everybody was having a good time.
So you're obviously you guys still have a huge name in racing, and right now, are we going to talk about Brent's boat?
Yeah,
Yeah?
100, yeah.
So right now you guys are in the middle, and I'd love to have Brent in to kind of give me his side of this too. But right now you guys are involved in putting together a modified V.
Right.
And so what are the ins and outs of that? What are you looking to do with that, and what's the timeline?
The timeline should have been yesterday, as they always say. The thing is, it's a different shaped bottom than the boats they have. It has a pad. It should be a faster boat. It should turn a little better because the pad is raised. You know, that's racing. I'm going to do it better than you do it.
Right.
Yeah, we're building it with the 29 molds.
Right. And
And, you know, now you talk about, you know, you try to suck up everything everybody knows as far as having ballast in the boat, where you can not necessarily pump in and out, but change it before the race. Because, you know, if it's going to be a mirror day, you know, those guys are hanging those things out to the edge to get them to go that fast.
Right.
Now, if you weight it down a little bit too much, it ain't going to do that.
right.
But when you go offshore, if you got the boat weighing nothing, you're not going to be able to keep up any speed.
Right. Well, what I'm super excited about is there's been a few new entries into that style of racing where you have the 29 outer limits of Marker 17 Marine. We saw a few 30 fountains come through, but the outer limits stuck. The fountains seem to be coming and going, but really the primary boats are the Phantoms or the Extremes. And really, if you look at all four of those boats I just talked about, they all kind of have the same idea, footprint, right? This is going to be a totally different thing. This is a totally different degree bottom, totally different design. I'm really, really interested to see what this does on a race course compared, especially having just bought a Phantom.
Right.
You know?
So, you know, you said it, all the big names, and of course they're smarter than us because the first thing they realize, there's no goddamn money in this damn boat. Why are we going to build a boat we can't sell? We can't take down to the dealer and sell. So they play with it a little while, maybe, and maybe some guy says, well, we'll get your name in the paper, but, you know, nobody cares about that either anymore. That's why you don't see those big guys doing it. That's the only reason I can think of.
Right.
And idiots like us, oh, yeah, let's build one.
Well, I think, too, in today's day, it's all, I hate to generalize, but really boating has become an outboard thing. Outboards are dominating the market right now. I think a lot of high-performance manufacturers are thinking more along the lines of how to make them fast with outboards and what's really marketable. The big block, those, you know, that high-performance stuff just isn't in the wave right now.
Right, but let's think about the other way. I talk to guys at Mercury. They don't see anything in the near future of this outboard problem changing.
Right.
So if you can't buy any outboards, now there's a new boat I just got in a magazine. Somebody came out with a center console fishing boat. Volvo has, I don't know who the boat is, but Volvo, it's got Volvo stern drives. And now they've jammed them in the boat. You got a swim platform behind them, you know, you've got the seat in the middle, kind of. It must be, you know, I don't know, hopefully the whole floor lifts up so you can get to the motors. But I mean, they're saying now you can have a center console boat with even a better transom because there's no motors
Right.
blocking the whole transom. Just like everybody else's center console with a stern drive.
Shout out to Smitty, who did it 15 years in advance. And I agree. And
So maybe, you know, that plus it's like everything. There's a little bit of logic in this that you know, right now we got so much money out there, people that just, they have money, they don't care.
right.
They'll buy a boat, they'll spend $2-3 million, ride it around for a year. Let's get the new one.
Right.
Lose 50%, 60%, 70%. They don't care.
Right.
Sell the boat, I don't care. The new things in town. How long can that go on?
I know. I've been thinking to myself, you see all these new boats go in and out the door, and the one really glaring issue is they all roll out with 4 or 5 of these outboards. So now you get, 200 hours, 300 hours, 400 hours. They start getting a little old, and maybe you're thinking, time for a repower. You're talking about a $500,000 repower.
Yeah, even like if you get the stock stuff, you can buy the warranty, which costs you a fortune because you'll get that extended warranty on 6 motors or 5 motors. But these kind of people seem to have the money.
But
they figure, I'm going to buy the warranty. I'm going to ride this boat for the 5 years.
But it's not the warranty. What it is these money guys, I'm watching it happen in real time. I'm sure you guys see it up there too, where this guy will buy, say, a 50-foot MTI today with 450s on the back, right? Well, what happens when Mercury comes out with the 500 next year?
Oh, yeah, that too.
I got to have the 500s. You know what I mean? So it's wild.
That's part of the game. I agree with you. But you got to remember, you want that warranty only because you could buy this boat, and one of those motors could blow up in a year.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't, or you go, like now, if you said, I want the 450s now, you know what they tell you?
Good luck.
It's going to be 2 years.
Yeah.
So a guy says, well, I got to ride this boat for 2 years, and I don't want to spend buying a new motor every time one blows up, so I get the warranty.
Right, but though, like what you're saying, when you buy one of these used center consoles, by the time you're buying it, fine, you got the deal, but now you got to put 4 new outboard
Right.
motors on
Well,
it.
as soon as you get freaky
Right.
and you want the bigger motor, but I think we're getting close to the end of that.
It's just, to me, it's crazy to see the money flying around. Like, I've never seen this. I mean, I've been around
Nobody's
for a
ever
few
seen
big
this.
waves, but this is a tsunami. I mean, I don't know when this one's going to finally stop, but it's crazy to see it just suck all the money up in it.
It is. Well, the new V12 that they made. See, that thing's not really aimed at performance.
No, that's a big sport cruiser
But
motor.
back to the old man Kike, he would have brought that motor out first
Uh-huh.
for a performance boat. Then he would have worried about Harry homeowner.
Yeah.
He would have wanted that thing hanging on the back of a 14-foot boat or something, doing 100 to get
Right.
the hype of the new motor. Those things
Killer is
aren't
what
even
kills
aimed.
me is how do you get on those when you have the whole thing lined up with outboard motors?
I know.
They all stern them in.
Well,
You
and
need a ladder to get down because those motors are so. Did you ever?
Well, you need
stand
broad,
next to
they
that
all
one that
like
was in
broadside
Cocoa
docking.
Beach?
in
Yeah.
those
The
things.
thing's like 7 foot tall.
it's insane. And I just, it blows my mind because it's so backwards from everything that I would think. Like, if I'm looking to achieve something like, I don't know, 1,600 horsepower, I'm thinking 2 big blocks. Something you can maintain. Do a water pump every once in a
it
while.
might-
Roll the top end in it.
See, and I'm thinking this motor that we just got, their claim on this thing is how bulletproof it is.
Right.
So you have a guy that plays around, plus you can't buy anything this motor we got in 3 months.
Right.
So a guy might go back and say, I could build that 50-foot boat with 6 outboards, or I could put 2 of these 850s in the boat, have a warranty, and they're fixable. I mean, if a pump goes, it's not,
It's not catastrophic.
you're not blowing a power head or a supercharger.
Right.
It costs you $10,000, $15,000 just to fix one of these things.
Right.
So they become junk.
If you can get the parts.
Yeah, right.
It's crazy.
There's already stories of guys losing their whole summer now
Right.
because of parts for their brand new boat.
With warranty.
Oh yeah.
Guy-
yeah, 'cause
guys
they're not
sitting on
bending
warranty.
Over, they're not bending over backwards to get. We sold you a boat, man.
Yep.
The next motor's. We're not tearing apart any motors
No.
to give you parts.
They got to keep the line moving, and it's wild, man. And I hope there's a simple solution in sight, but
Yeah, I don't see
know,
it.
man.
I see back to stern drives.
Yeah,
And the performance end. I always try to figure out why they haven't played. They made that Vizier. Remember that little short thing they were making for pontoon boats?
no,
Mercruiser made it.
right,
They were making it to put in a pontoon boat. It was a shorter drive. So why isn't somebody trying to look at a stern drive is how could we shorten them down like this Volvo thing did? I don't think they made new drives, but maybe they did. Where you could have an inboard boat. The transom is much nicer on the stern drive boat. You back up to the dock, the swim platform touches the dock, you step on the boat. It's
Right.
all underneath it.
Right. Yeah. Well, like you were saying. See, you remember what you said with broadside and boats?
Oh, yeah.
We
All these
can't
out-
do that near us.
No,
all of
because-
we don't have marinas and places.
And
with
you go to a
broadside.
bar, they're
You
not
gotta
having they're not having 6 boats tie up the dock with 30 or 40 boats could be stern in or bow in,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Now with a center console, you could always pull bow in and walk off the bow.
Right.
That's a little more livable. That going over the top of those motors.
yeah.
And those freaks step on the top of my motor with your shoe on. What are you crazy?
Have you seen the price of those cowlings?
That's like the famous boat show thing. The guy looks at the boat and he says, "I don't see any rod holders." The guy says, "I got $100,000 worth of upholstery in this boat. You think I'm letting a guy in here with a fish hook?"
Right. It's crazy. It is crazy, man. And it's funny because I look at like our sport and I think, what a wild thing, And
We
then
don't look so crazy anymore.
every once in a while I look at a poker run and I'm like, what the fuck are they thinking?
And there's 150 of them.
There's 90 the 50-foot MTI with the 450s on it runs in the 90s. Can you imagine? That's like,
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't even fathom that.
It's like you're riding along saying, honey, we're only going 90. It feels like nothing.
A buddy of mine bought a new MTI center console, the 42, and he's got 450s. It does like 93 miles an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
Imagine everyone in that with a cocktail and the guy stuffs it or
Crazy.
does something.
That's what's really, because we boat, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not one of these guys that just do
Right.
it for the magazine
Right.
picture. I'm thinking to myself, that's dangerous. You don't want to give me one of those.
And what's your speed? 92. Well, what's your regular speed? 92.
92.
What about when you run down the bank? 92. What about when you come home in the dark and the fog? GPS, 92.
It's scary, man. It is. And you know what's crazy is it really, I don't see an end in sight. It just seems to keep getting more and more unfathomable.
Because you know, at least I would think you know, that V12, that they're going to have to, people are going to be saying, when are you coming out with a V12 made for these boats?
No, and Mercury is working
Let's
on
get
it.
that
I
lower
mean,
unit. They got to be, because now we got to say, well, now I got to take the motors off because I'm putting 4 V12s on the
Yeah,
back.
and
of
those
it.
Right.
V12s, you need, if you have 6 motors, you need 12 propellers.
Right.
Because they're dual.
Well, they might change that, though. See, they might change that propeller thing for the high performance stuff.
The only thing that scares me about those is the pivoting lower for the
Yeah.
steering.
Yeah, for
Well,
Harry
there's
homeowner,
there's
that's
problems
great.
with
Yeah,
that
for
already.
for a cruising application, 35, 40 mile an hour, that's great. That just looks like problems
Well,
to
I
me in
think
the high
those
performance
motors
world.
aren't rated for over 80.
Yeah, they're not, and there's nothing holding them either. Like there's no, like if you look at the clamps strong, but there's no like tie bar between any of them because they all pivot different.
Well, that's
for that.
the other thing. They gotta have that steering, right? So there's no rear tie bars. And if you ride, have you ridden in any of those outboard boats?
No,
You feel the boat, even on a twin engine 30 with stock boats we used to make with twin, you feel the motors go in and out of alignment because there's no tie bars. There's a front tie bar, but
Right.
the motor mounts have enough, and you feel the boat speed up and slow down and speed up.
Right.
He was in that big boat. He said the same thing. Dad, I could feel it.
Oh, yeah,
Because the motors are all turning on each
They
other.
get out of alignment, and it'll drop 2 miles an hour.
Well, I'm waiting for one of those big V12s when that computer goes in that lower just turns.
that's what scares me. Is that it's all there's so.
They've got the motors so close together because the whole motor doesn't need a turn.
Right.
But the lower units have still got a turn.
But I will tell you what, they have created, and I'm surprised nobody's done it yet. Me and my brother have been talking about this forever. We were in Point Pleasant sitting on the wall with the race boat, and some guy rolls in with like a newer center console, 3 motors on the back, and you could see him getting frustrated. He can't find a spot to park. You know what the crane area is like at a boat race. He can't find a spot, whatever. So he pulls up next to our boat, right? And I'm not even paying attention. Like, I'm going to help him if he wants to tie up, but he's not even acknowledging me. So I'm like, whatever. I turn around and I see the guy walk in, go in the bar, right? I'm sitting there and I look. The boat's just sitting there. It's not tied up, nothing.
It's got the switch on the
He hit
automatic.
park.
And it sits there and holds its
Yeah.
position.
And you can hear the motors. Whirl,
shift it, turn and move it. What the?
Put it in park. I said to my brother, you know how cool that would be to pull up to the bar in front of everybody and just put it in park and get off and go in? People would be like, how do you do that?
How about this? But officer, I'm not drunk driving. The boat goes
driving
by itself.
Well, remember that one night when I met you at Kismet? It was blowing like 30. I just put the boat in gear and walked out, and the boat was sitting.
It was in a little corner
in
slip.
a corner slip
With a-
with no ropes, no
and
anything.
it
I
was
had
dock
in gear.
side.
And
It was in a
blowing
spot where
like-
he could step on the boat on the dock side. So he just put in a slip. He came in. He says the boat will be. I said, yeah, okay.
Is that your phone, huh?
No, that's my phone.
There we go. So, and I know I've been talking to your old man a lot, but dude, do we have some wars?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. I was just laughing. I was talking to Brent the other day, and we were talking about you, And I said, man, everybody's in trouble when he gets that boat together. I'm so excited that you're looking to come back and do some racing of your own. And,
Right.
you spent some time with Eddie in Kevin's boat in Cisco, right? And that's where I raced against you. And then right into the last 2 years, you raced with Brent here and there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brent, so everybody listen, Brent, holy shit, how do I say Brent's last name? I know how it's spelled. Apiarius?
Yeah.
Brent from Shoreline Plumbing. Love you,
Yeah,
buddy.
right.
I know
He
he's going to
calls
listen
them
to this.
apparatus.
There you go, apparatus. Brent came on the scene and has been, I'm more than impressed with how he's improved in a short amount of time.
100%.
Not that he was bad when he first came out.
Right.
But for somebody who's generally new to the sport, I mean, soaked it up quick and displays your brand phenomenally. I mean, that his boat is always immaculate. It's always up in the front.
Oh, yeah.
They wax it 6 times in the pits.
Well, listen, one thing I really, really like about him, especially being in your camp, is he brings a certain level with him. He sets the bar high, and it's perfect for your brand because he runs it like a superboat guy,
100%.
just 100%, balls to the wall. And it's cool that you had the opportunity to kind of get in there and steer him the right way. What's that been like being through, going from somebody like Eddie, who has all the experience in the world, and you were driving, to throttling with somebody like Brent, bringing him up through the ropes?
Right. Well, it was a different for me because I was born in that boat. So me driving it, I know every spot. So me jumping into throttling it, was a little weird for me because, starting off with him.
Well, you throttled with me. You just hung on.
Yeah, but that was wide open. You didn't have to worry, in the factory one. You just put the throttle to the dashboard.
Right.
So now
Yeah,
I'm watching
touch a
him.
trim tab, he'd say, "What are you, out of your mind? We just slowed down. Put that. I'll ride the boat on the side. Put that tab back up."
But I mean, he's a talented guy. It comes from his fighting and all. Very dedicated. And part of it where we weren't winning in the beginning was part me because I was babying him because I didn't want to hurt anyone. Because he never, he had an activator, but nothing of racing.
Right.
So, I broke him in slow.
Right.
And then, he started getting better and better. And, we started winning.
Because the guy is a physical animal.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge MMA fan. I'm not really a big football guy or basketball guy. I watch fights, and so in my conversations with Brent, it's extremely apparent that he carried over with him that mentality from fighting. I mean, he's got that every detail, every little inch of that race. He studies it, he learns from it, and it's really cool to see you guys bringing in new blood, and even now into your new build with him for his modified V.
Right.
It's just going to be really cool to see him take that next step again, and
It's hard to get guys, I've sold both the guys are going to go race, they go a couple races. It's hard to get like real guys that want to really race, really learn how to race. They get they have a couple years, they screw around, the wife is telling you way too much, whatever, and they disappear.
Right.
You get a guy once, like idiots like this, it'll be there till we die. So that's good for me.
right. Well, and with Brent, I have to think that mentality is going to carry over well.
Win.
And he's a good ambassador for you guys, and I just think that's really cool. And especially having the knowledge of racing against you for so long, I know how you run a boat. I know what your mentality is. So it was really cool to see him show up as a rookie and jump in with you, where you have all the ability in the world to go put that thing up in the front, but you took your time, brought him up through the ranks the right way. And now Brent's in a really odd situation where he's constantly back and forth between throttlemen or trying to find a teammate. And it's hard because, we race in the summertime, and people who have any clue what to do with a boat generally have something to do with a boat at home, right? They work at a marina. They, so getting that time off through the summers is almost impossible. So he's been without a teammate. And one thing I've been really watching is whoever gets in the boat with him, whether that was Eddie Simmons, Joe Riley, you, the boat performed the same way, right? And he drove the same way. He drives the same style, but the boat is overall most impressive that it doesn't break attitude.
Right.
Is there...
That's one of the things I was talking about when you just get dumb and lucky.
Right.
Because that 30-footer, it's hard to make that boat do something really bad.
Well, and I'll tell you,
hard.
I tried hard to make that boat do something really bad. There's pictures and videos to prove it, and they don't, man.
Yeah,
they
it's
don't.
very forgiving.
I could tell you a couple instances for people listening. Maybe from if you're not taking it from the horse's mouth, I'll help you with this. I'll give you some for instances, man. We raced against Donald in Reinforcer for a couple years, and Donald and he was racing with Al, where they Al was new to the boat, and Donald was trying to teach him in real time. And at the time, Class 5 was a Shark Tank. I mean, any boat in that field could have won on any given day. There was also boats like Cisco, Are You Faster, Coastal Boat Sales, us. I don't want to, don't name names. We need to make that sticker. So you look at those days and the little improvements through the years, right? Donald shows up, big horsepower, doesn't make a difference, right? You walked up to Donald, put 300 pounds in the front of that thing. I never caught him again.
Right.
It's funny how you can take that boat and make it do anything. You could put an HP 500 in it and go run mid-80s, or you can put big horsepower in it, load it full of lead, and it'll blow through 10-footers like it's nobody's business. And it's incredible. You go through, Donald's boat, Eddie's boat, Ken and EJ's boat with Are You Faster? They all, like for a little while there, we were all scratching our heads like, what are we going to do with this kid? EJ showed up and won like the first 5 races in a row, and I'm like, man, he's a tough motherfucker to beat, man, And at the time, if you remember when EJ first showed up, he was about this tall, skinny little string bean kid. He was quiet, and he'd go out there and be an absolute killer on a race course.
He's coming back this year. He's putting big power in there.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see it continue to transcend through the sport with Brent now. EJ's coming back. Eddie's racing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Eddie's
he's just
racing.
He doesn't know where he's going with this motor. It
He's
says
going
Jason's
wherever he
now.
got to go to get in a boat, I think, at this point.
Right. Well, and Brent's gonna. And you brought up Jason. Brent's gonna run with Johnny, right?
Maybe, I think. I had heard that.
So it would be pretty cool. I mean, you watch. It's what's interesting to me is it's not just your knowledge of how to build a boat, how to make it run right, how to race, but also the people.
Right.
Like if you look at the people that run your boats, I mean, it's really cool. Eddie obviously is.
Yeah, he's probably got the most wins, most races. He's got a couple hundred races in
Yeah,
that.
I mean, Eddie's claim to fame is all there. I mean, and you go through some of these people where, Ken and EJ, awesome ambassadors for you guys. Donald now, awesome ambassadors. And then, you get with like Brent and you hook him up with somebody like the Saris family. I mean, it's just all good. I mean, I just see all good coming out of your camp. It's just really cool.
Why isn't there a line of people to buy the boats? Is what we've never. Every guy
You're
that ever
too
owned
expensive.
a superboat. Yeah. Every guy that ever owned a superboat.
Better lower the prices, kid.
Selling that boat's the biggest mistake I ever made. Guys tell me.
Right.
Because nothing ever was the same. Guys that had all those 24s when I was pumping those things out. Every guy I ever owned one says, once I had that boat, I got something else. I was destroyed.
You know
I
what?
was so used to that 24.
The
Talk about a little boat.
The 24 though, I've been
Well,
in.
you're racing in a 24.
Yeah, but I've been in a few of your 24s, and they run like much bigger boats. They really do. I mean, like I do. I ran a 24/7 for a long time. The Carrera I ran. I mean that. I almost feel bad. Like me and my brother were just psychos. That's why that boat ran good. Like you said earlier, like when you're young, what's a beating? Nothing, right? Anymore, I look back. Particularly my first race in Class 5, the backstretch in Atlantic City that year with us.
Yeah.
I look back and go, I would never do that now. I would never.
I looked over. I'm like, what the hell is these retards?
Pop, when I tell you 30 feet in the air, I mean, we were in the air for so long, he'd get a quarter mile on us.
We used to laugh. We're up here. We stop for a beer and a cigarette while we're up.
Yeah. And I look back at some of that stuff and I'm like, man, I would never do that today. I was just talking to my brother. I don't have enough time. I mean, I showed you guys a little bit of what we were working on when we first got in the room.
Right.
I took some time off to chase some other things, and really, a lot of it's developing. I don't see me having enough time to get in my pro stock anytime soon. So I've been kind of fishing, like, could I put a 6-boat together? At least that. You're just putting a propeller on it and going for a ride, right? It's not all that pro stock brings with it. Propeller selection, weight placement, fuel ratios, right? So I've been kind of kicking that around, and I said to my brother the other day, that's what I was looking to do, and he goes, "Well, you got to find a throttlement, buddy." And I'm like, yeah. He goes, "Dude, I ain't getting back in one of them little boats. You're nuts, man." And it's true. But you're 24. I've been in a few of them. I've watched a few of them run, and they run like 30-footers.
Every guy that ever owned one. You live on Barnegat Bay. We got Great South Bay. It's the same kind of deal.
Yeah.
The guys they ran around with those boats for years. They say everybody says it's rough out. They go out in the bay, they say, geez, I don't know where you were. Especially when I first started, I would take a guy for a test ride. I had to go down, put the boat in the water. You come out of the Bayshore Marina in the southwest wind. So they see the white caps, and you see them telling their wife, "Now sit down, honey, hang on." You see everybody getting ready to hang on. You put the boat on plane, everybody looks and says, "What just happened here?" It's a good 3-foot chop running in the bay. Ferry goes by, you go through the wake, bang. Nothing happened. That's what it's supposed to be.
Right.
I used to, me having him as my father, I've had my boats, and I would be the test guy for bring people. My father's like, "What the fuck did you do to this guy?"
Get scared. I learned that.
I would I'm like, I thought the guy wanted to buy a high performance boat. I'd be running the thing on the propeller blades thinking he'd come out white. My father's like, "What'd you do to this guy?"
I had guys get out of the boat. He says, "I think that boat's too fast for me." I said, "We were doing 60.
Right.
Yeah, but you were doing 60 in waves that I don't even go out in.
Right.
I learned. I said, "Now, do you want to go fast?" It's like, I thought we were going fast. We're doing 45. It's just going along at that
Right.
speed, nice. Oh, this is really nice. You get a jump a little bit. They're like,
Right.
"We were doing 60. It's, until you get used to that boat, you don't realize it's not going to do anything bad
Well-
at 60 miles an hour.
Well, and the funny thing is too, like Sam could tell you, I think I took you out in your first fast boat, right?
Yeah.
So
And that was kind of like coming to the end right after that.
No, I love it.
but it's funny, she boated her whole life, but never understood what speed was.
Right.
Like you run 35, 40 in a normal boat. You look out the side of the boat, it looks like you're going fast.
Right.
You feel like you're moving. You start breaking that 65, 70, 75, 80 number. I mean, things start to change in a hurry, There's a good quote, it doesn't get real until you hit 100,
Yeah.
and it's true. I mean, it's you start running some faster stuff. I ran the green boat against you guys in Class 6 prior for years, but that was 70, 75, and we always had either a big compression motor or something that really you couldn't test with, so we never lit it up. I don't know how fast that boat ever would have went. I never tried, right? I went in that fountain for the first time in Inglewood Beach with my brother. And racing against the late Dave Rabb and Louie. And we were running probably 6s. We were running 80, And I'm thinking this is about all this thing's got. Like 6-footers, 80 mile an hour, that's respectable,
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my brother starts kind of lightening it up a little bit. Like he had the training wheels down,
Right.
And I'm like, holy shit, man. You start leaving waves at 95, 100. It's a different thing, man.
I know. That was always the joke. We were up there so long, we had a beer and a cigarette. Then we came down and drove the boat again.
Well, and you guys will get this. Like in the little boats, when you hit a big wave, it goes up and comes down, right? It goes up like this, it comes down like this. I didn't understand that once you start going faster, if it goes up like this, it comes down like this. It travels in the air for so long. And I got myself in some trouble first couple of races with that fountain because I didn't understand the speed.
And then you start learning about ballast.
Right. And balance.
Right.
That's the whole deal. If you look at all the old pictures, as big as those boats were, all the shots are this.
Yeah.
And even in the beginning, we talked about putting ballast in the boat. Oh, it's going to slow down too much. You don't realize airtime doesn't count.
Right.
Once everybody got an idea, maybe we ought to put a little weight in the bow of that boat and make it go like this instead of like this.
Right.
You might not have the top ends, but your overall speed you maintain is 10 miles an hour faster.
Yeah, and the beating on your hardware and everything.
And the beating on your body when you're not 21 anymore.
Well, in a funny, a good kind of maybe more famous example is Island Runner. If you ever go back and watch any of the footage of Island Runner run, that had 2 throttlemen. That was Frank Kerbeck that owned the boat, and then Herb Stotler would throttle when he wasn't throttling. And it was 2 completely different styles. Frank ran the boat very tight, ran it off its bow eye, like just kept it in the water, And then Herbie would kind of let that thing float a little bit, let it trip, And it's funny, I don't know that either one of them were really any faster, but I know it did a lot less damage when Frank kept that thing in the water, So there's a lot of thought processes that went into, like you watch some of those old boat races and sometimes you think to yourself, like, how much is really going into this and how much is really just surviving this?
Right.
But there was a lot of tricks to the trade,
Right.
as far as keeping the equipment together and, having
getting it. And the first guy that I remember that really seemed to run on the track, remember El Boss? Mm-hmm. That was a regular 32-foot cat. But they had that thing balanced. I guess they played with it and realized these cats, especially these cats, just start flying those things around.
Right.
I remember that thing running in Jersey, hearing it go by. They just were running on the rev limiter.
Right.
You just heard a
Yeah,
burp
but
and burp, burp,
it
burp.
went straight.
And it just went, it blew by everybody like their ankle
Right.
was dragging. And it just never did anything crazy.
Right.
When you're up there doing that,
Yeah, you ain't going going straight. Yeah.
and you start seeing the waves and slowing down more than you needed to because you think, boy, that next one
That's
don't
gonna
look good. I'm going to stop up there and have 2 beers and 2 cigarettes.
It's funny, when I first started boat racing, one of the things that I couldn't get over, I was racing against, which people now know as the Smith brothers, back when I first started was Cotner Trailers. And I'd watched them run their 26 Corsa, and I was following them most of the time. I was 14, just getting started racing, And I'd be watching them run, and they had I got to give it to them, man. They kicked my ass for a long time with a bone stock 496 out of somebody's Sea Ray. And to run 70, he couldn't put the tabs down. So,
Right.
like, you'd watch him run, and he'd hit, like, a little 3-4 footer, but it would look like he hit a 10-footer, because it'd stand the boat straight up,
Yeah.
and put it. And my brother would yell at me, "Stop watching them, because he'd hear me, whoa, 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 like, are
Going whoa for them.
are we gonna do that? And he'd stop watching them, And it's funny because you learn, like, as time goes on, you start to learn, like, it's all just, it's relative. It's how you're gonna run your race. It's not
Right.
it's not necessarily beating the other guy. It wasn't until we started racing that I understood how to race somebody else. My whole life I focused on racing my race, right? Like being as fast as I could be. And then I started racing you and realized all that shit went out the window. This guy drives backwards. this guy drives his boat looking at me.
Well, that's what I laugh about in the old days. When you raced all those miles, I went out there to race my race at the speed I could run. Don't get lost.
Right.
That was the big thing because so many guys got lost or beat their boat to death, and they wouldn't even make it 20 miles.
Right.
And they'd break something. I mean, I had a guy bought a 24 from me, and he decided it wasn't big enough, and he bought I don't know what it was, maybe a Signature. He got all these fancy California motor mounts and all. I said, that stuff...
Motor was in the bilge.
Before we made Seaside. Those fancy aluminum, cast aluminum mounts and all. When I passed them, they were laying on the stern holding their hands over the exhaust pipes because the motor had fallen
Knocked the
down
pipe out.
and the pipes had pulled off. The rubber had pulled off on the stern piece, and the water was just flowing in the boat.
Right.
Yeah, what are we going to do now?
Right.
They hadn't even made Seaside. That's 20 miles. They hadn't even made 20 miles. They were done.
Right.
He was pretty much done racing after that, too. It's like...
Right. It's
didn't
wild.
Get the concept.
Right.
You're not building a showboat like those California dreaming boats, like one with the colors and the stuff and all that.
Right.
We in the early days, those things that come out, guys that have those little 29 footers and 26 footers and stuff in the bay, they break and sink in the bay.
Right.
You know,
Right.
2-foot
Yeah.
shot, boy, it was really rough out here. That's like the lake.
Right.
2 footers.
It's funny, like, I don't know if, I think it's, the common misconception is that the skill level today is much higher than it was then as far as how to run a boat. And I almost agree with that. Like,
I think it is only because the speeds went way up.
right.
Got to remember,
Well-
open boats were only doing 70.
Well, in proximity too,
Right.
like a real tight battle back then, you're probably separated by a couple 100 feet. Like it's not, or maybe less, but you know what I mean. You're in a big open ocean. There's no reason to be rub rail to rub rail with somebody. Whereas now,
Only at the start.
Yeah.
right. Whereas now these kids, and I call them kids, they're not. These guys, these women, they're running these boats 3-4 inches. You guys want another drink?
Yeah,
We have Diet Coke. That's it.
that's fine.
These kids are running
Put
these
a lot
boats.
of ice in there, please.
Okay.
They're running the boats, I mean, a foot off of each other at speeds that 50 years ago people couldn't even comprehend.
Oh, no.
Well, the thing now is if you don't join the way these guys are beasts now, you're not going to last long. Because how long can you come and last?
Well, and John, I mean, honest, I spent a lot of time watching this year, and I'm watching the races, and I think it's only gotten worse. There's more
Oh, yeah.
killers now. Like when we used to run, I mean, and I hate to even talk like this, but it's true. we used to look and go, okay, I know I can beat that guy. I know I can beat that. Like, you knew 8 out of 10, you had them covered. There was a couple guys you really had to worry about, you know?
Right.
And I watch the racing now, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Anybody can win. It's like even Class 5. You watch like Brant. Brant had a real dominant year, had some issues with breakouts and stuff.
Right.
But he was never far from Woody. Woody was never far from him. Bulletproof chasing them. I mean, you got real battles going on all over the course. So it's interesting to look at the difference between the then and the now, like how it all goes down. I think it probably was harder back then. Like the difficulty of starting and finishing was harder. There was way more variables.
Right.
Yeah, well, I think a big thing, technology. You ran the boat too hard back then. Something was always going to break. I mean, you had, look at the races we had, over 100 boats. And you look at the finish, you know, there'd be 25 boats that had finished the race. For one reason or another, lost, broke down, sinking, wherever they went. But so few guys actually finished the race.
John will pass it across.
Yeah, well,
Thanks.
that's why I went with the Mercury package now.
Right.
Because I'm going to really play on the balance. I'm making my motor mount so I could move my motor. You know, I got a jack shaft, not a plug-in.
Right.
So I'm going to, when I set my boat up, I'm going to run the exhaust straight up through until I find my spot. Then I'll put it out the back.
Right. Right.
But, you know, moving that motor up ahead is going to make that boat, it's really going to be an animal.
I'll tell you something, though, buddy, and you'll remember this. I don't know that those tractor headers are an advantage in bracket class.
No, I'm just putting tractor in to get my, so I don't have to go
I don't
through
think
on
that-
tailpipe.
Right,
So I'm going to test the boat with the tractor headers, and then when I find the spot for my motor, then I'm going to go out the back.
Because I laugh all the time. Are You Faster was one of the coolest bracket class boats. I mean, the baby blue and it stood out, right? And the sound, I mean, with those tractor headers was unbelievable. The fans loved it. It was
Yeah,
great.
everybody, when you start those things up, everybody loves that.
But if you're sitting outside of that thing going into a turn, you can sit and listen, and it's and I go, okay, he's going in. Like, I knew when they were planning on turning, all you had to do was listen.
Yeah.
As soon as they bailed, I knew if he was going tight or wide, you made a move, and you were all right. I mean, the boat handled like a son of a bitch. I mean, that boat, that's, you know.
Talk about guys who jumped in a boat
Right.
out of nowhere.
Yeah, but they have a lot of running time, and, you know, they've
Yeah, but
owned
not
all kinds.
like you said,
really
not
similar.
like doing what we do in these races. Nobody goes out and rides around pleasure boating on the wood and 8-footers.
Right. Well, and the big difference, too, is from pleasure boating to racing is you can't lift. Like, that's, you know, like I try to explain that to my buddies. Like, I understand you have a fast boat, but having a fast boat's only not like 50% of the battle. It's knowing how to use it. Like, I explain it this way. When people ask me, when I get a call from a local newspaper or they say, what's boat racing like? I said, have you ever seen Times Square? You know, and the lady says, yes. Okay. Imagine you're in your car in Times Square and I put a rock on your gas pedal and said, drive. That's boat racing. You're going to crash into 900 cars. You're going to maybe come out the other side with all your limbs. You know? And when you're done, your car is beat to shit. There's nothing left of it. You got to go home and rebuild half of it. You know, that's boat racing. Like, people don't. It's not what car racing is. It's totally different, man. It's its own special little world.
And the weird thing is, I try to explain to people that talking, well, that's a race boat. I said, you don't understand. A race boat is not because it goes fast. It's because it handles well.
Right.
Now, if you're going to go out, you're an offshore fisherman, and you're going to be the guy who says, I want to run out 50 miles or 100 miles to go fishing, and the weather changes a little, and you got to spend 10 hours coming back barely on plane because the boat won't do anything. Now, take that away, have a fishing boat that you can go out 100 miles and cruise at 50, 60 miles an hour and turn around and come home at 50, 60 miles an hour in the same boat.
Right.
That's a race boat, but it's also the supreme pleasure boat. They don't get it. It's a race boat.
The difference is setup. You know, like, I think.
Yeah, but when you go to outboards, setup is setup. You're bolting outboards on the back.
Right. But I'll sit up. We got a little river here. You know where Viking Yachts is? Have you ever been to
it's
Viking
right
Yachts?
off 95.
Yeah,
right?
you go by it when you from the highway. You see it.
Yeah. So that's my river. I boat there
yeah?
all the time. And so I'll be sitting there at the bar or whatever, and you see kids roll in with real nice pieces. My area was all Grady Whites and fishing boats, right? And lately it's been really coming along high performance-wise. And I'll sit there and watch these kids roll in, and they want to talk to me, how do I get set up? What do I need? And I'm like, dude, first of all, maybe hydraulic steering.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a lot of things that people, just because the boat's fast in a straight line doesn't mean you have any business on a race course. You know, I understand you spent some money, you got a nice little supercharger in there and all that, but that drive will break off the back in 2 laps. You know, there's a lot, and it's not only that.
And turning the boat when you don't have tie bars because you've got that steering system and all those motors are flopping around back there instead of tying them together.
When's the last time anybody with a pleasure boat ever popped it out of the water and just checked the toe, see if the outboards were even straight, or you know, like race boats?
Or the question which people are, do you put them in? Do you put them out? You don't know.
You don't know.
You try it.
You try.
Sometimes you wouldn't think that having motors not aiming straight ahead would work better.
Right.
Well, that's one of the things now with bracket racing. You know, you can't, the competition's so evil that you can't really, if you're going to go for points, you're not going to pleasure boat your boat home on the weekends because you drive to Lotto, you were driving around pleasure boat. Now all of a sudden you go and you drive, 1,500 miles and you got a stupid problem.
One way. It's funny. I think it's almost like a personality thing with boat racing where it's the guys that are going to go home and spend a month working on this boat between now and the next race. Whereas like pleasure boat guys just want to go see 90 once and then tell all their buddies they did it.
I know, and they never do it again.
Right.
That's even the bigger joke because you talk to guys, oh yeah, the boat does 90. Yeah, I did that once.
Mm-hmm. Right.
5 years ago, the wind was at my back.
And it was a mirror. I did 90. Well, what about last? Well, no, I ride around at 60.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why I went with the Mercury motor because I want a pleasure boat.
Right.
I want a pleasure boat ride.
Well,
and
those
to do that.
Those 860s are bulletproof.
Right.
Man. It's such an awesome package.
I got a lift in my backyard, so I'm just going to be blasting all around. Like Point Pleasant race, I'll ride there from my house.
Right.
I won't even trail it. I'll
was
just
one
get
of
in
my
the
favorite.
thing.
One of my favorite things, man. Me and him are sitting at it. Where were we? The River Rock or something in Point Pleasant.
Right.
We're sitting there and we're having a beer, me and him, and I'm like, "Where's your old man?" He goes, "He's on his way." Right. So we turn around and look, and here you are in your 20. Was that a 24 center
that
console?
Was the 30.
The 30.
The 30 center console you rolled in. I was laughing my ass off. You got out of the boat. First thing you said was, "I beat the traffic."
I know, because coming down here in
on a
boat,
Friday?
and coming down here in a boat and on a straight line down here is a 35-minute ride.
Right.
Yeah, Fridays
You
isn't
can be
good.
on Staten Island for 35 minutes
Right.
when you're
Oh,
100
well, it
yards
took us-
from the...
When we were with Richard this year. It took us like 4.5 hours to get here that Friday.
Yeah,
because we had to get him from school, remember?
Yeah. How about when we went to Lake Apatcon?
Oh.
I think it took us 6 hours.
A tractor trailer flipped over on the bridge.
The worst.
And we were underneath the bridge just breathing in all the...
And it was a really hot day.
And I didn't bring my cooler.
hot.
It's the best day to do that.
We stayed in one spot for 3 hours.
That's, I get calls all the time. You guys in Long Island have a really good youth, like, rejuvenation going on. Every other day I hear of some new young kid out there buying a boat to come racing, and it's just great because, guys like us, we're fading, man. we're like this
Quicker
weird,
than we like to think.
Well, gamers.
Yeah, and there's these new kids coming that are jacked up, ready to do this, and it's so good. And they call me all the time, how do we get a race out here in Long Island? How do we do this? And my first answer is always call Louie. Talk to Louie about it first.
But after Louie, talk to Louie about it first. You'll never do it again.
Poor Louie, man. I mean, he got his brains beat in trying to do it. But
And the weird thing was, in the beginning, the town of Patchogue was so fired up to have this thing. I mean, they shut the street down the night before, everybody partying, all the boats on the street, everything big. After that accident, they didn't want to know that we were breathing. Go home, don't come back here ever again. Done.
it's a shame because...
And it's hard to do it anywhere else because I tried years ago. The problem is down our end of the bay, you got all the ferries.
Right.
And
they're not shutting down
I
for those.
was in with those guys because one of the things that got me going and talked about before, well, I was sitting home in my garage with no money. A friend of mine, who happens to be in the book because he won in an outro, he told him, I got a friend up the street doing some fiberglass stuff. I got to make all the seats for the new ferry boats. By myself in the garage. No bills, no employees, working shifts so you could get 2 seats. You had 2 moles. Get 2 seats every day. Because they came to me, the boat was 3/4 done. And they said, well, can you do this? We're bringing you money today. I made a pile of money doing something else. But I went to the ferry company, could we rearrange something?
Not
With
happening.
those schedules, man, we don't care what you're doing. We're coming out of Bayshore Marina, and we're going where we're going, and there's no way in hell we can change any of it.
If a boat's broken down, we're running over it.
And they happen to run right in the middle of the bay. It's not like you can move them
Well,
a
that's
little
why
bit.
Patchogue was past the point of Sayville ferries. Nothing ran.
Yeah,
From there
that's why-
east,
That's
you
why
didn't
they
have
tried
anything.
to
That's
keep
why
it.
it was able to do it there.
It breaks my heart that race went away because I think it was probably one of my favorite events I've ever been to.
Yeah, that was a fun spot.
Well, it's so when I think of boat races, there's a lot of things that come to mind, but Patchogue specifically had a very warm, awesome memory. Like, I can remember standing there at that band shell watching Louis and all of his daughters playing, and Jeff
Right.
Cropper getting up there and
Right.
playing drums, and the street party was awesome. Remember
The whole town was happy to see it.
It was such a good. You know what it reminded me of is it reminds me of when we pull into St. Clair. You pull into St. Clair and there's that immediate love, like they're so happy you're here. That was what Patchogue was like. I mean, it was just such a great time.
Well, politicians ruin everything. We know that. Because, look, remember when we raced that Long Beach race was great.
Yeah.
But we couldn't use any of the ramps. They told us that we
fucked
couldn't
us.
go out Jones Inlet. I went out it.
We went.
All,
Right.
remember,
Some
you
guy
broke
says-
down and had to get towed all
Yep.
the way through Mott's. I go, Eddie, the Coast Guard's the only one that can close an inlet. So we tied up right at Point Lookout at a bar. I went right out Jones
I
Inlet
talked to
that day. I'm
everybody.
like, I'm not going all the way out
I
and
talked
around.
to everybody at the race. I said, you don't understand. Some schmo cannot close this inlet to us. If the Coast Guard came up to you and announced
Yes.
at the drivers' meeting, by the way, you can't go out this inlet, fine. That never happened. And those poor guys all were so worried about it. I mean, how many miles did they have to run
They
to
had
that
to go to
inlet?
Mott's Bay. Mott's Inlet.
Yeah, and how far back and forth?
And then
20,
when he
20
got
miles.
towed all the way
Pop,
from there, he
I got
goes,
a tour, buddy. I broke down.
And getting towed in. Why couldn't you get towed in the inlet if you couldn't go out it, but getting towed in through
I
it?
broke down. First of all, Freeport, Long Island, to this day, is the best race, actual boat race I've ever been a part of. The water.
Well, if you look in the book there, that's when the beginning of Long Island was in Freeport.
Dude.
Guys were down there in their family boats with motors and stuff hanging on there.
We went out that day. It was a solid 4 foot with a mixed in 6. And the green boat, it was like the green boat and the god of the ocean got up that morning and made a deal. It was perfect. The boat ran. There wasn't one time where I felt like a hard, like never. Flying over flybridge boats. I mean, if do you remember that race, how close the spectator fleet was to the backstretch?
So, yeah, sometimes they get a little closer than you like them.
I was going over the pulpits on their boats, and people were, by the second or third lap, caught on. We got to watch this little green thing. They were all out on the pulpits, fucking screaming. I mean, I was trying to high-five people. It was nuts. I finished the race, miles ahead of second place. I mean, it was the best race I'd ever been a part of. My brother gets a little cocky, right? And at that time, we were running that 510 with the Oldsmobile heads on it. I mean, that thing would scream like 8,000 RPM. He starts lighting this thing up like 84, 85 across the top of this shit. And you know when you break a motor, you know when it's bad when it doesn't make a noise. When it does that, like just nothing happened, you know? So we opened the bilge, there's oil everywhere. And at the time, my brother was racing the Fountain after that and the Super Cat at the end of the day, right? So my brother had to get back in. So he says to me, listen, I'm going to jump on this boat and go in. I'll get the trailer and put it at the ramp, and then I got to run the Fountain. I didn't make the south turn, and he was coming out with the Fountain, right? I went in that inlet, right? And when in the inlet, he passed me on his way in with the fountain. I made like, what's the closer inlet?
That
right?
was Deb's, actually.
Deb's,
I
yeah,
was
Deb's.
calling it
Deb's.
Monte
Yeah.
Bay's right next to it, but that was Deb's inlet.
We
That's
get
where
there,
They were going in
he
and out.
passes me.
That's the last inlet.
Yeah.
After that,
Well,
you got to go to the city.
so we get halfway in. He passes me with the Super Cat on his way out. Runs a Super Cat race. Comes back in. I didn't get pulled out until 8:30 at night. It was like a
Talk
14
about being
mile
young
tow.
and taking a beating. We didn't take a beating twice. We raced in 2 boats.
Want to
right?
hear the best part of all this? The guy that pulled me in was Smith Brothers, who I just kicked their ass. Just tied up to me and towed me all the way
He
in.
needed
by
a
the way
new
now-
motor by the time he was done
By the
pulling
way,
you.
I kicked your ass now because you told me in.
That's and you know what? It just speaks to what I always say about boat racing, that it's just one big family.
Right.
You know, those guys, I love those guys. I loaned them my boat. Unfortunately, I sunk it before they got the chance to race it. But in Fall River, Massachusetts, they were tied up with somebody in a points battle in Class 6. I was running 5, and I spun it around and blew the drive off it. But before the race, I told them that, you know, since theirs was broken, they could take mine and use it as a replacement boat. So they went to the gas station, bought, 50 gallons, 116 octane for $2,000, And they come back, they got their drum, they're waiting for the race to be over, and they don't see the green boat. Well, here I come, half underwater, no drive on the back. I had to buy the fuel from them. But it's just so awesome. The sport just generates that vibe. It's so cool, But
I know no holds bar on the race course, but when
not
you
once.
get in,
Yeah.
I'll help you. I'll tell you. I'll help you
anything
get
you
the
want,
boat
man.
out of the water.
Yep.
I know.
And I laugh, guys. For years, thought and we had our issues in the beginning, but we became great friends.
Right.
And people would say to me, like, I thought you hate that guy. And I'm like, I don't hate that guy. He goes, you fucking fooled me by what you just did to him out there.
That's a whole. That's the race spot.
And I'm like, that's different. He would have did it to me. But we were a bunch of knuckleheads, man. That was. Talk about glory years. I laugh. I still talk about those that first year and when I went to Class 5. Unfortunately, I broke every goddamn race trying to catch you guys, but we had such a good battle going on, not just for one race, for a whole season. It was like, it was magical. I tell you about this all the time. There could be 19 boats, and he could be in lane 1 and I could be in lane 19. By turn 2, it was us.
It was you two.
No matter who tried to get in the middle of it, no matter who tried to, it was us. By the end of the race, it was me chasing him, and this bastard would drive like this with his arm this way, looking at me, because that little boat of mine, it wasn't so much that I could outturn him. His boat would turn as good as mine would, but I could make the move faster.
Okay.
So I would wait for him to kind of get a little deep in a turn and try to pick off that inside, but it would never work because this fucking guy drives backwards.
He sees you coming.
He doesn't watch what's in front of him. I don't know how he's never mowed down a turnboat. He's always looking behind him. He can never get an edge. But we had so much fun, and I credit you all the time, and I'll do it publicly on the show, as the guy who taught me how to race. I've raced a lot of people through the years, even leading up to our battles, but when I got to Class 5, one thing I'll say to Class 6 is testament, and I think it's still this way. Class 6 is a very gentleman class. It's very, if they cut each other off or anything like that, and I love this about this class. They come up to each other after the race. They work it out. They're friends. It never happens again. We move on, right?
Yeah, and a lot of them, too, say, I talk to them, too, well, I know I'm not going to win, but I'm here to have a good time.
Well,
You're never going to hear that out of anybody in our class.
No.
I'm not here to win.
I got to tell you.
I remember a day in the pits at Jersey, guys next to me. He's got the heads off his motor in the pits the night before the race. I'm not even taking the cover off. He says, well, I'm here to have a good time. I said, good, because I'm here to kick your ass. You're one less guy I got to worry about.
Well, and that's what changed is we went to Atlantic City that year, and I put my helmet on the same way I would any other race and went out that inlet same way I would any other race. That green flag went up, and I ain't never seen no shit like this before. 9 people cut me off before we got to the first turn, And I got to tell you, man, it set me up. It gave me knowledge that I never had. It gave me an understanding of how to run a boat. It got me to a point where in those couple years we raced each other, I knew you and your boat as well as I knew my own. Right. Because I had to, because you understood my program and you understood how I was going to beat you. Right. So I had to understand that for you as well if I ever wanted a chance to contend, you know. Right. And so I credit you all the time when I talk to people as the guy that taught me how to race. It was, you know, I understood the mechanics of it. I knew how to get around a course pretty fast, and I'd accomplished some things, and I thought I was King Tut, you know. And then went out there and got fucking humbled, man. I mean, humbled in a major way. And I think it's so cool that you're still here and you're still humbling people, you know, because it's so good. You know, I look at Class 6 today, and I look at Franny Bell in that Rum Runners
He's
boat.
running the shit out of that boat.
Franny's got a good program. He does. He's got a real good program, real good horsepower, a couple of guys in a boat that really understand that boat. They really do.
Those guys really run that.
They run well.
What kind of boat is that?
That's a 26 Larry Smith Scarab.
Oh, yeah.
And him
got it there.
They must have rebuilt the whole inside of the boat or something.
Yeah.
Huh?
multiple times.
Yeah, but they, you know, they spend a lot of hours in there, man.
You know, there's a guy in there. He was next to us at the World Championships. They're racing that class. He says, "Oh, I got a new boat. It runs so good." I looked at it. I said, "Of course it runs so good. It's a 24-foot superboat." "No, it's not." I said, "No, it's not. It's a P&D, which is the boat superboat came from."
Yeah,
he has one.
Stretched it.
No,
That's
it's a
26.
No, it's a 24.
No, but his boat.
No, yeah.
What, Franny's?
Yeah, it's a 26.
Yeah, that was it's 26 or 27.
26.
Because Excalibur stretched the 24 to 27. That's Mark Schneff's boat.
Right.
He made the mold off a 27 Excalibur.
No, Franny's is a 26 built by Larry. I don't know the
But
origins
this
of the
boat
hull.
that was sitting there was an old P&D.
Right.
Right.
That must have been before, though, because his boat.
Because the P&D had a round, the inside cockpit was round, and they had the steering wheel mounted on the deck. And when I made the new mold, I put a little thing there for the instruments and all.
Right.
And he had bolted in that boat a dashboard in the corner. He just, you know, guys, at home in the garage one night,
This'll
they
work.
took a couple pieces of wood, put some bolts through the back of the thing.
Yeah, you want to laugh? The side of my Phantom on the canopy, we put 2 scoops there. The next time you see it, they're not there in that picture. Next time you see it, when you look at it, see if it looks familiar. We come in one day, and my brother's bitching at my old man. He goes, "You know, we're doing all this work, and all I asked you for was simply get me some air in the bilge, and you haven't done it." You know, bitching at him, right? So my old man gets a bug up his ass, walks in the shop with a roll of tinfoil and disappears, right? And I'm like, the fuck is he doing, right? He went in there. He's got a total restoration 1965 Corvette going on in there. It's fucking gorgeous, right? And I walk in the shop. He's got tinfoil laid all over the hood.
And he make a mold.
He's
off
pulling
of
a
it.
mold off
Yeah.
the fucking Corvette. His 65 Corvette. You know, and I'm laughing. I'm like, "Pop, I think we could do a little better than this now, you know." But they work perfect.
Right.
Scoop's a scoop.
That's it, man. I was laughing my ass off. I'm like, "Pop, this car's immaculate." He's got
Yeah,
resin
God
and
forbid you spill a little resin on the paint job on that car.
resin and glass all over it. Too funny, man. But anyway, my point about Franny is you look back at Class 6 now, and Franny's got a firm grip on that class. Yeah. He's clearly the one to beat, right? There's a lot of good running boats there. Deception, Money Monster, some of those boys are really stepping up in a major way. Punching hulls with, I believe that's a P&D.
I don't remember the guy, but I looked at the boat. He says, "Boy, I can't believe this new boat I got runs so good." I said, "It's a 24. It's the original boat."
Right.
The original deck.
Well, this is...
and think about that. They couldn't have built them too bad because that boat, talk about an old boat still running, that's an original deck.
Right.
That thing's got to be 40 years old.
Well, the Punch and Hulls boat, I believe, is either a P&D or a Martini, which I believe were pretty close.
Right.
They were all... you know
They
how many
all came
guys...
from the
How
same-
many guys? Pantera, Carrera, Cheetah, a few more. They were all that boat, your boat, the green boat. They were all that boat with different decks.
Right.
Everybody said, "I'm going to make a deck." They were smart enough not to screw with the hull.
Yeah, that
Because-
four-bow on that you've been it, bury it, that thing pops right back
Yep.
up, man.
Yeah. Well,
Nobody I am figured it out because the weird thing is, when it goes down, you would think some water'd come in the boat. Water never comes in that boat. That's the first thing women
How
say.
many times have you been down on that thing and you go,
I'll give
oh
you-
my God, I'm going to get blasted?
I'll give you my.
That's women that sit in that boat. They say, I love that boat. You know why? Because I don't get wet.
Yeah.
That's the first comment out of their mouth.
What's crazy is, and my best explanation for it is, if you look at the boat where the hull side comes up to where the rub rail is, there's a legitimate chine there.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There is. I mean, it's.
But I don't
probably-
even think when you're running in a 2-foot chop, it doesn't even hardly get to that chine
No,
because
no.
the lower strake seems to get it aimed
Yeah.
straight out from the
100%.
side of the
They
boat
nailed
before
that.
it comes.
Oh, yeah.
they
They
nailed
nailed it.
Nobody knows who made the original boat because I did business with Built Right for years. Now, Built Right were the first guys to make the custom interiors. They did the little Donzies. The story with that guy was that Aaron O was sitting in some diner somewhere looking at the upholstery work, going, look at the workmanship on this. And he went and met John and Roy from Built Right, and they did all the upholstery forever. When they were still in business, if you had a 66 Donzi, you called up and they said, I have the patterns right here. You get it, it'd be so perfect, you take the oven off and it snaps would line up.
Right.
And they did the first bolsters. They made the first stand-up bolsters. Alan Brown, I think, who was racing in the 60s, he said, what about this idea? And they went to Built Right, and they made the first stand-up bolsters. Like everything. They got old and died.
Right.
And a guy who bought all the patterns must have thought this is like easy.
Right. Good luck,
I tried because I had all my patterns for all my boats.
dude.
He says, I don't even, he paid for the money, then he said, you have all this stuff?
Behind my back is a full upholstery shop, and I'm telling you, it ain't easy.
No, interior never is.
You know, we've had some people through here that work with us, and we go in there from time to time and try to help, and I'm just getting in their way. I'm like, this is impossible. I don't know how
Now,
you guys
with
do
the
this.
technology, the big companies now, they got everything computer cut.
Right.
It's perfect every time.
Yeah, but I
Those
can't
guys
even-
with computers with their own little hands.
You
because,
can't
like
even
I
work
say,
the scissors to
I'm
cut.
a pretty smart dude. I can't even figure out how to turn that sewing machine
Not
on.
only that, forget the sewing. The sewing too. It's a mindset of the patients because you have to do it the same way.
Every single time.
The patterns, you can't
Yeah.
say, oh, the machine went around the corner and cut a half-inch off because
Yeah.
when you put it on the boat, the piece of wood at the bottom will be poking through the side. Right away you see it.
Believe me, we deal with it all with the interior.
It's always a nightmare interior. Now they got all the computers. Guy says, I want all the diamonds. I want all this. Now it's sewing that by hand.
Yeah, now they come where you buy like the Altera leather. You can buy it with this whatever stitching you want in it, diamond, the hexagon, all already in it, machined.
Right.
But they charge, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but
It
at
ain't
least
cheap.
it's straight.
Oh, it's straight.
Yeah.
Well, oh boy, Frank, it's gotten straighter. But, it's an extra $200 a cushion to put that diamond in there.
Right.
Or $300 something.
Right.
You understand in these days, unfortunately, labor rates are going crazy.
Yeah.
And finding a real guy that's going to do it,
Good luck.
you got to pay him. And you got to deal with his personality. Oh, boy, Darryl.
Yeah, he does.
He's
This
his
guy
own-
does the most amazing
He's
work.
his own worst enemy, though.
He's doing all the Doug Wrights near us now. A bunch of Doug Wrights came to Mike Domino. Pleasure boats with the 400s, 450s, but I mean, his work is like unbelievable.
Who did your center console you built?
Frank did that.
That-
That was good. He
that
did a
came out
guy.
nice.
We
he-
sent it back 3 times.
Yeah,
Well,
he did
yeah,
it.
you're gonna have that.
Yeah. He does for the money. When you go in, the interior can be
Well, how
$20,000.
about you?
Like Mark's boats, Mark Schneff. His fit and finish is bar none. But in 2 seats and a bench back seat is $15,000.
Right.
Gotta
We
be
had
able
a
to
guy who
swing.
did cars, airplanes, and boats. He came and looked at the.
My black boat.
The
He
black
wanted
boat.
20,000. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
We'll
Well,
call you
this
back.
boat, the whole boat's only 130,000. 120 for the interior.
So, what'd you ever do with the center console you built?
I sold it.
Did you?
We have another one built. We're just waiting for some motors, and then we're gonna now.
My problem now is getting anybody to do fiberglass work.
Oh man, yeah, we're running into the same problem.
Yeah, you can't get workers anymore. It's
Because
impossible.
as a regular fishing family type boat, we could sell a lot of those 29s. but you got to be able to build one a month.
Right.
You know, it's not like the old days where you just slap the boat. Now everything, the fit and finish has to be like, you know, unbelievable now.
And
you know, you try to skimp a little, then they're like, what's up with the interior and this and that.
Yeah.
So you got to go the distance.
But you were beating me up when you were buying the boat.
Right.
You want too much money.
Like that 29, I sold it for 130. I had 100 into it. So,
Right.
I mean, think of time. Find 30 grand, but bills,
Right.
building it. You know, that one cost me a
Well-
little more because it was the first one.
Well, and lay the money out. That's,
Right.
You know, the time is one thing, but laying
That's
the money out's a
problem
bitch.
now.
yeah, and I sat on that boat for a year and a half because I built it the way I kind of wanted it, which maybe now we're going to go more to family, fishing, and performance.
Right.
Where I tried to be like an MTI of a smaller boat.
Well,
Didn't work.
the weird thing is, they don't talk to me. They talk to him. Oh, your father doesn't make the boats fancy enough. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. So when he built that boat, he said, I'm going to show these mothers. We're going to do everything.
Oh, man.
The
that
day
boat-
we say they wanted, we're going to do
Oh, yeah, I
it.
had a $10,000 stereo in
Yeah.
that
I
boat.
mean,
Lit,
everything had to be perfection. The boat's too much money.
Then it was too much money. Meanwhile, I'm like,
We
you
put
have
all
no
exact
idea.
stuff in it that you wanted.
Which really, it wasn't too much money. I mean, you
No.
look at the market.
Oh, no.
It's
no,
there.
it's not.
It's there. And I was in the boat. When you showed up with it in Ocean City,
Right,
Maryland,
right.
it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, I crawled all through that thing. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, it was worth every fucking penny.
It was worth wait. That
Every
should have been
fucking
$180,000
All day
boat.
long.
And you know what? If some real company that everybody knows about, they would have walked in and paid $180.
Right.
Not
Well,
even
then that's
blinked.
the next thing.
Right.
Like,
Oh,
if you
John,
brought
you're
that
getting
boat to
crazy.
Lake of the Ozarks or somewhere where they moor and the stereo and this, you know, Long Island it's a tough market there.
You know what I noticed? I had never, like, I've raced up by you guys, but never really boated up there. I came up a couple months ago and did that little run that they had put together up there with the
Right.
progression kids, and I was blown away by just the performance mindset of Long Island. Every boat I went by, I don't care if it was the boat I was on, was that kid Dylan's boat.
Yeah.
He had a 24 was it 24 Mako? 24 Mako, I don't know, little walk around Mako with a pair of 250s on it. I'm
Right.
like, you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
are out of your fucking minds. Every boat was all jacked up. Every boat ran over 60. You know? Like,
And
Right.
even if it was never made to go anywhere near 60,
No.
they figure. I said, you know, you can make a brick go fast. You put enough horsepower on it. And they, oh, but that's a good boat. I said, well, a Mako's not really. I mean, they're not made for going fast.
no.
The bottom of the boat, they'll hit. You talk about hitting.
Well, and what was funny was he used to have a pair of 150s, but he didn't, after he was all done, he didn't have enough money for props. So it was on like the same props as the 150. So if he cracked it, it would throw you out the back of this thing. It would accelerate so hard.
And then hit the rev limiter and go into safety mode.
Man, I was laughing. But that's what was cool was there was like a bunch of skaters out there, a bunch of stuff. Like out here, Jersey Shore, you get the New York money. Like the big dollar boats, the big outer limits, the big
Right.
skaters. And to me, I've seen that stuff so much that it almost doesn't really hit me anymore. It's like seeing a nice car drive by to me anymore. It just
Right.
doesn't. But when you see these little boats, like these little
Right.
24 skaters,
Yeah,
and
but the
Right.
thing on Long Island, you notice if you look at those boats, they're all old.
oh yeah, all of them.
Right.
Nobody spent. Those guys, they don't have any money. They come to me. They want to buy a boat. They want a new 21 with everything known to mankind on the boat. How much money you got? I got 30,000. Well, that's all right. Down. No, I got 30,000.
That's it.
Well, the thing
What are you gonna
is,
do with that?
like I tell him,
You didn't buy the motor.
they
You didn't buy anything.
Yeah.
They buy the boats and they end up all at the end having the big money. Like Anthony Perry's, that boat was gorgeous.
Immaculate.
And there
yeah.
was
I
another-
mean,
there was a
beautiful, and you know everyone's like 40 grand.
right.
That boat for 40 grand
That's a deal.
was not a lot of money.
No, it was a deal.
No, that
But
was a
guys
deal of a
like
lifetime.
buying $10,000 or $15,000 boats.
Yeah, and
then
plowing
they'll
30 into it.
right, and before you know it, they don't think so.
Right.
But you know,
takes them 4 or 5
inside them, they
years.
love the boat so much. Then, you know, where they thought they were putting 2 bucket seats and
Right.
and putting you know, like blue top over them and stapling it
Right.
on. Now they're doing the interior,
Yeah,
the
then they
bracket,
go to our boy Darryl, and he
enclose the
says
well.
the bucket seats are $500 a piece.
You know, where it's
Just
all
a
the
boat.
same in the end, but they trickle it in.
Right.
And you know, you
Now
kind
they got a
of
20-year-old boat
Our
with
peop-
$100 grand in it.
Right.
But with all boats, they kind of get their money back. You know, they might lose a little, but our boats hold a very good value if
Back to
they're
what
in
I said in the
because
beginning, I'm going to make boats that don't break.
Well, and here's the thing
Those
too.
21s.
When you buy a performance boat in any fashion, you know you're going to lose your ass on it.
Right.
That's just first and foremost.
Right.
But you see the boats, the particular boats like yours, where they perform well over time. Like you look at one of your 21s that you built 30 years ago, it runs the same way a new 21 built by somebody else
That
runs
was the
today.
only thing that George Linda and our boy did. When they designed that boat, I don't know who was standing by him. There is no 21 that I know of that'll run with that boat.
No.
well, that's one of the reasons why I'm building the Super V Light with that boat. Because I believe it's going to be very forgiving of the setup at the end where, like say, instance, your boat, where you go from calm to a little bumpy, you're going to miss the edge on the setup.
Right.
Where you're not going to so much. You might get beat, but you're going to have a lot more forgiveness. Because
Right.
with the padded bottom and all in that boat, it's fast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in that big motor class, what's it, 700 horsepower you're allowed? I don't know everything. But
I don't know that they have a horsepower limit. It's a 510
10,
cubic
right.
inch motor. They mandate the heads.
Right.
It has to be like a shelf bought intake and carb.
Right.
So they don't mandate the intake and carb, but it has to be something that you can get, like not a custom deal.
Right.
But yeah, they come out like 660, 680 horse. Which really, think about that horsepower on one of your boats. It's already at the speed number, and you haven't even tried putting it on a diet yet.
Right, and I'm gonna aerate the bottom. I'm gonna do, and the canopy's gonna make it faster.
Right.
Than
Well, that's a
having the
21, you realize. That's a 21.
Well,
A
Kirk is
friend of-
another one who hit it out of the box. He stretched that boat and he bumped. If you look at you've seen many. You see the 21 right in the side, and where
Yeah.
he stepped up and added the 6
the piece
feet
he
on,
added
that's
on.
where he added it, and it just
Right.
worked out. And he changed it back to 23 degrees.
they were
And
gonna-
and that's Mark Weig you're talking about?
no, Kirk Rogers, Kryptonite.
Oh, okay, Kryptonite. I thought
He
I
took
thought you
our
said Mark.
21.
He was going to build a little family boat for his father and him to ride around, and it ran so good. They said, "We're going to go in the boat business and kill Superboat."
Yeah,
Kryptonite.
that's why the Kryptonite and that boat, it became something
That's you.
that it was. That
We're going to kill Superboat with that boat. My
yeah. Well,
buddy
that's why
who I made him-
Kryptonite. And his father owns a killer steel business, and he realized that the boat business isn't all what it's cracked up to be.
No.
It's a tough game.
Now, when you got that kind of money, you ever see the operation that they run in their steel business?
Oh yeah. The son got smart and decided,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what? I'll buy boats.
Right.
Go in that
I'll
business.
buy-
I'll buy whatever I
I'll
want.
buy
Fuck
whatever
the
I
boat
want.
business.
His father's ready to retire, so he's running the place. It's a huge building over.
Oh yeah, like they built schools. You know what I mean? Big time federal buildings, big millions of. When I bought the molds, I paid. I bought both sets. I paid $50,000. I ended up selling a set, the decked over. I just wanted it really for the center console, and I kept the 29 hull with the center console deck.
Well, 27 and 29, the same boat with a swim platform.
You're right.
Right.
But anyway, when I went to Charlie, which is Kirk's father, and gave him $50,000, boy, he goes, that $50,000 ain't making up for the $2 million I have,
Laid out.
because they built that 39.
Yeah,
And
we
he
worked
got-
on one.
hemorrhaged.
And
He
got
hemorrhaged
the
a lot of
racing
money.
fever. He got the racing fever.
Yeah.
And they had that 29 was a good boat.
Oh yeah, they
Right.
could have sold
And
the
they
shit.
had a lot of them sold to dealers. The thing was really going. We're building a race boat.
He
now,
put his
bigger
time
boat.
into well, not even he put his time. We always think bigger, and the bigger boats more money, because from the dashboard back is in an IO boat. If you have two IOs, it doesn't matter whether it's 45 feet, 35 feet. It's
Cost
two
same.
motors from
Yep.
there back. So he's thinking this 39 footer, man. Now I'm gonna get 4, 5, 600,000.
Yeah.
But it just ended
pan
up
out.
falling
It
apart on
wasn't
him.
drivable. It wasn't drivable.
Yeah. Well, hey, 1 second. First time in Offshore Live history, drinking some Captain with you guys. I got to take a leak. So Sam's going to ask you some questions.
I was going to say, I have a couple questions I want to ask. So, all right, John Sr., I have a quick question for you. What was the bug that made you want to start creating Superboat?
Like I said before, my stepfather decided we were going to build a race boat.
Okay.
I've been in boats all my life. My first job, summer job, I worked for a Mercury dealer. I had one of the first Boston whalers because he was a whaler dealer. Believe it or not, you know what a 13-foot whaler cost then?
No,
$410.
not anymore.
So my old man sprung for that. I had my little 8-foot boat. I had saved my money. I bought a 10 horsepower. First night out, I flipped it upside down.
Okay.
He says, that's the end of that. And he sprung for the whaler. And I was working for the guy, and he sold me. They sold for $600. His cost was $410.
Okay.
He sold me the boat for $410.
Wow.
I rode around down there for a while with this 10 horsepower. I took off my little homemade boat. I said, this is not going to work. A friend of mine had a motor one night. We took it off his boat and put it in my whale. I said, I got to save more money. I got to get a bigger motor.
Right.
So the next summer I came back. I worked for the guy. He had a 35 left over at the end of the summer. He sold me that for $450.
Okay.
So I was riding around a 13-foot whaler, which, believe it or not, at the time, sounds crazy. It was the second fastest boat in the bay. The only guy who could beat me is some guy had a California ski boat type boat with an IO.
Oh, wow.
He could beat me. Nothing else would beat that whale. You know how fast it went? 32.
Top speed, huh?
Yeah, top speed. Beaten.
Kind of like you like to go now.
Yeah. Getting beat up. Nights I lived in Islip, and you pull that Islip Cove, and the bay shore is next to it where the ferry companies. So on a bad night, you go over to bay shore and wait for the ferry. You follow the ferry across the bay. And then when you got to West Island, you took off where it got calmer, and you drove past the ferry.
Right.
But when I got involved with my stepfather and went to the first races with all those guys there, if you look in that book, you see these boats. It was boats. They had that aluminum boat, Maritime, I think it was, all hand-tooled. You know how they do the aluminum and all that shit with the turbine motors and all? I was like, I got it. There's nothing else I can ever do.
I have to be part of this.
I got to be this.
Uh-huh.
Got to be. That's what my mother said. You never built a boat, you got no money. I'll figure it out. I am going to do this no matter what.
I'm doing it.
There's no way I'm not doing this. Mm-hmm. So I started in the garage with that 16-footer. Got lucky with the ferry seats and repair jobs and all. Cut my fingers off at work.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
And body parts. didn't spend any of the money. Managed to live. When I got the big money from Workman's Comp, $2,500, I got the 24 and moved into it because I'd made the seat money and moved into a building and started making that 24.
Now, how old were you when all this was going on?
30.
Okay.
30.
Okay.
Because I had spent probably 10 years of basically doing nothing. Having a good time.
Just having fun.
Just having fun. I had friends at Fire Island, had houses. I'm staying at your house for the week. I ended up one summer, George and Pete, their family, and it was one of the few houses that survived the 1938 hurricane. And they had been over there forever, so I met these guys at the firehouse parties they used to have in Fairhope. And ended up living in their house. One summer they said, John, Pete's on the submarine, I'm on the tanker this year, you might as well just stay in the house. Jeez, that's going to be a real problem. I got a job over there building a house for some guy, working on the house for the summer, making a pile of cash for a kid, living in a house for free. Had my whaler, could go anywhere and do anything day or night.
You had the world at your fingertips.
Why would any kid ever? Yeah, what do you need money for? I'm making $125 a week cash money. I'm living like a king over here. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, you get to a point, you get married, you got to figure doing something. Now I got a house, I got a garage in the backyard. I got that 16-foot Eltro laying out there in the back with weeds growing out of it. Eltro went out of business, so I didn't feel bad making their boat. Mm-hmm. Made the 16, and off I was with the plan of having a bigger boat. I mean, because 16 was no. They had won around Long Island. They won a lot of races on those boats in those days. It's 17. Because you got to think, when you raise the side a little higher, the boat gets longer. It's the same boat, but just a little higher. So they had a 17-foot Eltro, 18-foot Eltro, wooden boats. You know, they make every boat. But when I got the race boat and won the first big race,
that was it.
Benihana, I said to my wife, you know, we paid for the boat today. And it was, you would have had to kill me.
Liar.
Yeah.
No, John.
No, I know he did. But.
They gave, you know, see, one of the things with racing, which I guess it's the way money goes, every race you went to, you got the prize money. You got all this contingency money, right? If you put a little sticker on the boat, you got to check from this guy, check from Mercury, check for this, you get another $1,000, $2,000. One year somebody said, well, we're not giving the contingency money out anymore, only to the high points guys at the end of the year.
How do you want me to get to the end of the year?
I have to go to every race in the country to get that.
Right.
I'm having too good a time on the weekends. We used to race that boat here, go home, take the gas tank out of the cabin, go to Fire Island for the weekend.
Right.
So I wasn't going to run the whole country. Besides that, I hate the driving. So I couldn't win, so that money went away. And then as the money you got less and less. Now you get none. But that wasn't going to stop me. What, are you kidding me? Build a bigger boat than I built the Cat. But I never got a rich guy to buy that damn Cat. And the skaters came out. They were a little faster. But in rough water, remember the old extractor? Nothing was going to touch that boat if it got a little rough. Nothing.
I've been dying to ask you about the Cat project.
Never going to touch it. We ran in Fort Lauderdale one year. We started in the start. I have that on videotape. We pull out in the front of the start. We ran 100 miles at 100 miles an hour. Nobody was near us.
Right.
But you couldn't sell. I couldn't sell. Skater.
Right.
Couldn't sell.
Now, that was 80s?
Yeah.
It was 80s, right? Late 80s?
Yeah, middle to late.
And that's right when Skater was starting to get their 32 or
Yeah,
28,
we were racing
32.
the 30, whatever the hell it was.
32.
And 32.
Right.
In calm water, they could beat us. In rough water, they couldn't. They weren't even near us.
Right.
Yeah,
Now-
then you had Joey's boat, which was a killer.
Yeah, then I had the Killer Mankind
East
boat.
Coast Marine, the one with the
Right.
Buick small blocks. I mean, that boat was doing 130 back in those days. He was beating the open boats.
Well,
Right.
I'm the only guy, a gnat on elephant's butt, had the APBA change their rules twice because of my boats. RC Marine with
Can I tell you something?
with the twin engine RC Marine. Remember that boat?
That was the MRD special with the 2 small blocks and a
You
30.
can't have twin engines anymore. I said, you guys have been arguing so long, you don't have any horsepower. You've been letting your big motors get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now I can build a 30-footer with a single engine on it. The kind of horsepower you guys are building, don't count your days yet. Then that's now. Nobody touches that boat now.
Yeah.
If I had ever had rich guys that bought that Cat, I didn't get anything out of it because they ran so good after the race in Florida where they beat everybody, open boats and everybody. The guys from Dubai saw the boat.
Yeah, they bought Joey's boat, that East Coast Marine, and it left.
It left the world. So nobody ever saw it again.
Right.
So instead of having guys, oh, wow, look at that boat running. If it had spent a year running, but it never got anywhere.
But now, at the time, you had some real heavy hitters building some of those Cats.
No, but none of those guys were heavy hitters.
Right. But
Heavy hitters were buying skaters.
well, you had no, that's what I mean, the manufacturers. You had Skater involved. At that time, Shadow was still building Cats, right?
Yeah, but they had been coming to their end.
You got to remember, that's a Shadow.
Right.
I made it longer. Back to George Linda. George Linda's the guy who made that boat.
Well, kind of, I was getting there. So you had the Shadow there, which you perfected.
I made it longer. I changed the strakes because that boat hopped a lot.
Yeah.
I made the strakes smaller, and Extractor came out. He could beat everybody if he didn't break.
Right.
But he had no money. He was a clam digger.
Right.
John D'Elia used to say, if you'd made a lower boat, I would have bought it in a
And
minute.
that's when he made the flat deck.
Right.
But then by then, Skater had got so far
and
advanced.
bigger.
Then they came
everybody
with the
went from
36.
30 to 40. Or whatever, and it's...
So it's funny. You're in that same kind of category of, you're the low man on the totem pole, but you got the baddest shit. And
you would think they would have bought it just because in the end it was the baddest shit.
no.
But
Gotta
then
buy
they
the
went.
name.
See what happened is though, which I didn't realize at the time. When a guy is in that bracket, he's going to buy the next biggest.
Right.
So as soon as the 30 would have been going, he came out with the 36.
Right.
So you're running the same boat, same course basically, like we said, from the dashboard back, everything costs the same, and you got a 36 Skater. So my 30 was done.
Well, and I'm kind of getting around to why when I start this show, you laugh and I tell you you're one of my idols. I love the resiliency. So everything you've ever built has been a top-notch product, has been a boat that goes out and outperforms most, right? Now, outside of racing, you had an issue with Carbonell, right, over the superboat name?
He tried, but he couldn't do anything about it. He wished he could, but he couldn't. He tried. I had the name before him.
Long before him.
Long before him.
Yeah, 1970.
He couldn't do anything about it.
Well, and it's like...
And I was Superboat one word. He was Superboat
Two words.
International.
Right.
But that's what made you patent the name.
Well, all that time, I never had a trademark.
Right.
The guy came out to my shop one day whose family owned Baja. They had sold to Mercury. And we're BS. He says, boy, you know, when I was a kid, I was like, this guy's Superboat. Oh, man, what a name. What a guy. Wow. I thought you were the coolest guy in the world. He says, you got that trademark, right? I said, no. He says, what? What? You realize some guy could come in and take that name and you would have to pay him?
See you later.
Yeah.
And he said, I got the guy for you. Of course, you don't know anything. You're still a kid. I'll still be a kid when I die. He gives me, you know the word Philadelphia lawyers, right? Well, he says, all law firm, Philadelphia, you call them, you talk to them, they'll get you trademarked. $15,000 later, it was trademarked.
Well, you had to put your communion money out, right?
You realize you could trademark a name now on a computer in about 15 minutes?
And didn't it take like 6 years?
No, it took... They had to do it twice. They said, you know, that's a whole weird world there. In the beginning, the guy says it was turned down because it's too generic. He says, but that's okay. We can beat that because you've had the name
Well, and funny enough,
for 20 years.
I was told the same thing with OPA. When I filed first through the USPTO, they were giving me my number and all to check up on the status of the trademark. But then I got a letter back that Offshore Powerboat Association, 3 incredibly generic words.
Yeah, but you put them all together.
Well, and so I argued it, and I argued the fact that it's been an entity for over 25 years, that at this point, really, what are we squabbling over? And they gave it to me, but same thing. They tried the same thing
Were
with
you
me.
paying a lawyer, a Philadelphia lawyer to do all this?
No,
He was paying a New Jersey criminal.
That's where they got me, because by the time I was done,
you know what
it was
happens?
$15,000.
15 grand's cheap if you woke up one morning.
And some guy sent you the letter. Yeah, by the way, we now own the name. If you'd like to keep it, you can give us $100 a boat.
To this day, and I'll just put this out there on the internet for everybody to know, if you'd like to purchase OPARacing.com, it's for sale right now, $250,000. We got pirated the same way.
So is Superboat.
It cracks me up, man. Our website went up. The domain, whatever. We didn't pay it in time or whatever, so it lapsed for a day. There was somebody waiting for that moment to happen.
Oh, you go.
Swooped in, picked up the website, and now it's for sale on GoDaddy.com. $250,000, and you can be just like us. And
luckily, there's 14 other domains you can put the name on.
It's pretty funny, man. But it's funny how that shit works. But it's just when I'm saying to you, there's a lot of people I respect in this sport, but very few of them had their teeth kicked in quite like you did over the years, and you're still here.
Yes, I know how to build boats. The rest of the world is business, and especially now you have to redo that trademark every 10 years.
Right.
So the government sends you a letter. You're coming to the end. The first time I did it was $50. I just did it again. It's $350. I said, it's still such a deal. Because you do it, my daughter does it on the computer in 5 minutes.
Right.
The Philadelphia lawyer called me at the end of the first 10 years. We will be glad to re-up your trademark for you for $2,500. So by now I'd learned a little bit. And I said, let me look into this and find out. Yeah, $50.
Right. Well, you know what happens with that Philadelphia lawyer bullshit, right? It all starts in Long Island. Shit rolls downhill, buddy.
Yeah, but you always know the famous term, oh, you get the Philadelphia lawyer. I got him.
Yep. Shit
And then
rolls
they said,
downhill.
well, we're sending you letters. You're not responding. I guess you'll take us off your books. I said, that'll be fine.
Too funny.
Because they, it's like when I got sued. The lawyer calls you on the phone. He's chatting away. Yeah, we're looking at it. Then you get a bill for $500 for phone time.
Yeah.
I said, well, don't call me. I'll call you.
Right.
That was another world I went through. I got sued twice. That's real hairy stuff.
Yeah.
The guy is from down here. You might know who it was. He was good friends with Rinderer. You know Rinderer? John
No.
Rinderer, the kid with one hand? That was another boat we had racing. A 24-footer with a 90-year-old man and a kid with one hand.
A lot of profit in that.
There'd be an ESPN 30 for 30 about that right now.
So he sells a boat to a guy, a 24 with a single engine. And he ride around 3 or 4 years, maybe more. He calls me, he says, well, the guy wants to put twins on the boat. Tell him no. 24 gets squirrely with twins. It's not a good boat. Two motors lift the stern. Just don't do it. He did it. One day they're out here in Barnegat Bay. Of course, nobody had a drink. I had to go to, that cost me $30,000. Go to court. They all sat around his house all day. He lives right around here somewhere. Never had a drink.
Uh-huh.
Went out, decided to go out in Barnegat Bay, blowing like hell. They go out in the boat, so they roll the 24 up on the side against the driver's side. He gets bent over the seat, backwards out of the boat. 24-footer never does anything wrong if you stay in the boat.
Right.
Boat takes off down the bay. No kill switch. Took them 3 days to find the boat. It ran around somewhere. I don't know the area. It found someplace where there's bulrushes. It ran about 100 yards back into the weeds. With nothing wrong with the boat, sat there until both motors. So we found the boat that was aluminum running out of the exhaust. Got a little hot. So go to the examination before trials. Hydraulic steering, hydraulic steering. They tell the whole story. Bye. Nothing wrong with the steering. You're out of the case. I said to the lawyer, the boat was so good, it rode around with nobody in it. Until it drove into the woods and melted down. Why is that my fault? I should be out of here.
Right.
Oh, no, well, it's
The
different
guy
with
got
you.
paralyzed from the waist down.
Right.
Why is it there was nothing wrong with the boat. I mean, that's proven here.
And meanwhile, the guy didn't even, it was a single engine boat, and it's got a Coast Guard sticker
Right.
for rating reasons.
And
with
they
that.
called me on the
and he
phone.
Put it
I
over,
told them,
put
don't do
twins
it.
on it.
Don't do it. We've done it. It gets squirrely. You got to be, it's not
Guys like me and you have to run you
Yeah.
just put a regular meatball in it, the thing will start
Yeah, good
shine
luck.
walking and doing.
and a day that everybody sat around the backyard all day, nobody
And
had a
didn't drink.
cocktail.
Of course. Yeah.
And
Didn't
no kill-
happen to be like
and-
Memorial Day weekend or anything, right?
Right, and no kill switch hooked onto the guy, so the
Right.
boat takes off by itself. Thank God it didn't
Hit somebody else.
hit
yeah.
somebody
You'd be
and do
still
something.
paying for someone's living room furniture when it went through their house.
So I didn't have any money. I said, guys sued me for a couple $1 million.
Good luck.
And Renderer had some money, had an insurance, right, his business. So they gave him $100,000, his insurance company. Guy says, what are you going to do? Nothing. Case was dismissed at the end
Right.
because he testified for a week. The judge said on Friday afternoon, I don't want this case back in my courtroom next week or I'm going to be a different man. So then his lawyer came to me and said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm not doing anything. The lawyer says, well, maybe you ought to give him some money just to be nice. I said, you're my lawyer. Why are you telling me this? He
Isn't that
says,
funny? Isn't that funny? Just be nice.
yeah, be nice.
Give him
give
some
away.
of the $30,000 I gave you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. He says, well, you maybe make them just not do anything. He gave him $10,000. I said, well, I'll give him $10,000 because I can't afford to go through any further than this. Meanwhile, the lawyer should have said, case was out of here. You're
Yeah.
done. And if he had been a better lawyer, I would have never been there, because the lawyer from my Nordic said at the end of this deal, the steering was perfect. Well, at the end of this deal, the boat was perfect. Nothing broke, nothing wrong.
Did you have that Philadelphia lawyer again?
No, I had a Jersey. Well, that's the other thing. You're out of state.
Well, that's the mistake you made. You hired the crook.
Yeah. I heard a Jersey lawyer.
That's the mistake.
That may have been a mistake, because he wasn't out for blood, because after once the judge said, the guy was talking about his pain and suffering and all that, judge says, this has nothing to do with the case. The case is what went on in the boat. I haven't heard anything really bad about the boat or anything that went on here. So by next week, you guys should reach some settlement. That's when they came to me and went to him. His insurance. My lawyer said, hey, we're out of here. Instead, he tells me to give him 10 grand. And by the way, here's my bill for 30.
Right.
So I don't remember his name, but don't get him. So that was, luckily I was making money in those days. If they did that today, I don't know what I'd do.
Well, what's pretty phenomenal about that particular circumstance is you watch the stuff that goes on today. Like, imagine, take it off the water. You can go to any Honda dealership and buy like a 929 or something street bike that'll run 220 miles an hour. Kid puts himself through 3 18-wheelers, and Honda's not in court.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, how
Same
do
as boats. Look at the boats today. You can, like the kid I told you about, the Sea Ray. I put him in the other world.
Right.
He buys a 50-foot skater that goes 180 miles an hour and goes out there and flips over. They're going to sue skater.
Right.
Well, why? I was the same with me. I had another guy. The other one was a 21. The guy was in Huntington. He's riding along on the side of the channel, right? On the side of the channel, the water's 2 feet deep. He says, oh, I like to... He admitted in court, I like to jump the wakes. He jumped over the wake and landed in the 2 feet of water bow first. The bow just fell off the boat. I said, yeah, if you ram it into the bottom of the bay in 2 feet of water at 50 miles an hour and the bow is still on, I know I built a good boat, but I'm not sure about that. Because when they started the case, the guy was peacefully riding along on Saturday afternoon, the bow fell off.
Okay.
I said, at 21, the bow, when I first got the, guys had been racing those things. That's when the races, there were 15, 21-footers at every race.
Right.
None of the bows fell off in Long Island Sound in 4-foot waves. This guy in Huntington Harbor, the bow fell off. I didn't give him anything. Lawyer said, what do you want to do? I said, the case is out of court. It's done.
So something that just dawned on me, I've been meaning to ask you, is I know the obvious connection to Challenger. Now, Challenger, when they were first putting out, not first, they eventually put out that 21 with the twins. Did you ever build a 21 with twins?
I think I built one.
One? I've never seen one. That's why I was
There
curious.
wasn't many, the horsepowers were going up.
Right.
So it got to the point of putting twin 200s on a boat, or 225s didn't really pay when you could put a 250 on a boat. A couple miles an hour, plus, of course, the cost
Right.
of doing a twin-engine boat the right way, because you really need, front and rear tie bars, the whole schmear. And of course, then they built, like you have one there with a stern drive. Then a few guys did stern drives. I did one with that Blackhawk drive.
What's crazy is we had a few of those Challengers here, twin engine, and you had your life in your hands. Like, because, as power progressed, they might have been built with a set of 225s, but these guys had 300 XSs hanging off the back of these things. And I don't know how you ever held on to one. Like, the prop walk alone was insane. That's why I was curious if you ever did it, because I don't know how you could possibly hang on to it. Like, you were way better off with a single and just flying it than trying to hold it down with two and push it. It was a...
Plus they never really got as fast as you thought they were going to go. And again, like we were talking about earlier, I did 100 once. The guy says, I have a 100-mile-an-hour boat.
Well, no,
and he got it going
There's
100.
a couple of them out there, though. The guy Larry, who I sold, remember that ratty 21 I had in the back of your yard? I sold to him. He put 224s on it with 15-inch midsections. The thing was a beast. ran
Yeah,
good.
I rode in a couple of them. They weren't.
They ride better than 24s, believe it. 24 with twins is like the most
no, you
deadliest
can't.
thing you ever
That's
want to
why
be
I
in.
told the guy you can't.
When you go to the 30 with the totally different, but the 24 with twin outboards, oh,
24 lifts so high, there's no
horrible.
water under the boat.
Right.
So it falls. In choppy water, it's better. But in a calm day, it gets up there and it starts
yeah.
a shine walk. And trying to be the guy that says, "Oh, if I drive through that, I'll be fine."
You know, and all
You need a
those
set of cast iron.
and all the boats we did back then had the bolster seats. So you know, if you
were
were
high.
bigger, you were up high,
Yeah.
and now the thing starts going.
Right.
It wants to just wing you out.
Looking through some of the technology changes, right? Watching videos of some of these newer builds on these older boats. People are putting new power on them and stuff, and they're going to these 5-blade Maximus propellers or
Right.
Mercury props. And what cracks me up is they go through this mill of they'll pay over the course of time $6,000-$7,000 in propellers, only
Right.
to go back to those cleavers.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem on the smaller boats. You start going to the bigger wheels and all, a lot of bleeds. You got to watch this stern lift.
Well,
it
and-
could get violent.
And what's funny is, I'll walk around the beach and these kids will be telling me, "Oh, I went from my 24 to my 27 pitch prop," but they have no information on diameter, rake.
Yeah, was
Right.
it better?
They-
Was it worse?
They have no idea.
Well,
They-
I got
you ask
a
them RPM, they don't
47
know.
blade propeller offside.
They just think I built, I got a 30 pitch propeller now, so my 50-mile-an-hour boat should do 100.
Right.
And
Right.
it don't work like that, And it's funny, you watch them go through all this process, and then everybody winds up putting those old cleavers back on them. Those cleavers seem to be the key in the little boats. It cracks
Right.
me up.
We used to put, it was funny, the 24 took a 21 chopper, and the 21 took a 24 chopper, and that was the propeller you put on them.
Right.
They went straight. They didn't do anything wrong. Don't mess with it. It already works.
Right.
I know, but I even get caught up. I did a 24. I said, well, these new propellers and all, I'll be able to run the motor higher. Undrivable.
Yeah.
Undrivable. Stern lift, trying to run in too much V, bowed down.
I'll tell you, and I think I might have told this story on the show before. The most afraid I've ever been in a boat in my entire life was the green boat, racing against you guys.
I'd be afraid just watching you.
And I agree.
I used to say to John, I don't know how they're running near you, but I wouldn't be in the boat.
I'd like to say that if you were in it, it felt a little better than it maybe
Than it
looked, but it didn't. It probably felt worse.
I'm going to go with worse.
But we tried. We had the idea that maybe we could go down a little bit with X Dimension and help us get a little more drive off the end of the wave. Because if it was like a medium chop, you guys would eat us alive. Because your boat could just get up on top of it and boogie. Whereas I would fall in them. But if it was big enough to get you upset, then we were kind of on an even playing field. It was just how crazy you
It
wanted
wasn't
to be.
my playing field.
Well, we got the idea that if we went down a little bit next dimension, put a spacer in the drive, it would give us that little bit of extra push that maybe we could make the next one, know? And so we tried it. The problem was it jacked the ass end of the boat up. Now, we tried it right before Point Pleasant, so we never had it in flat water where we could really feel the difference. We just figured, fuck it, let's try it. We went to Point. We're running down a straightaway, and my brother's screaming at me. Like, anybody who's ever seen Anthony, onboard footage of Anthony, whatever words they're putting on the screen are not what he's saying. He's screaming at me. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You never drove a boat before. I'm pulling this fucking thing. I'm like, all right, hold on. Let's try something, right? I said, I'm going to hold the wheel straight. I'm not going to touch it. Just going to hold it straight, all right? See what it does. This boat would run. It would maybe run for 50, 60 yards, get up to like 70 mile an hour, and it would just fall. Dunk on this side, but go that way, right? So it's running on its side. I'm
And it
heading,
would stay there?
and it would stay there. I couldn't get it back no matter what I did, right? So my brother pulls it
That
down.
sounds like fun.
Runs it back up, pulls it down, and then now my brother's starting to see it's not me
Right.
fucking the boat up. The boat's fucked up, right? But it got so bad that, and now at that time I had 8 years of consistent driving in
Right.
that boat. I had never missed a race. I knew that boat, right? So we're running down the straight, and I'm saying to my brother, we couldn't catch at that time. I mean, remember when Al first started with Reinforcer? I mean, we're running with Don and Al, and I'm thinking to myself, I should be beating Don and Al. Al's got zero experience. I should be at least beating him. I can't get anybody with this boat. So we're home, and we're trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. How did all this get so fucked up? We're thinking maybe we put 400 pounds in the front. Maybe it was like 100 pounds too much. So we went to, that was the race where we came out Point Pleasant Inlet and made the left. Instead of the right.
No, because they didn't want to run in front of Jenkinson's because he ain't giving us any money when running in front of the other guy.
Right. So that's what we did. So we left that one, and I believe we went to Atlantic City. Same thing. We didn't figure it was the spacer, and we don't figure it's the only thing we changed. A boat that's run same.
We changed one thing and it screwed it up. What's wrong?
So we went down there, and I mean, you had your life in your hands. Like you start getting. I'm not afraid of bow lift. It's when guys start getting transom lift, they get in trouble.
No good.
Yeah. Like bow lift, I mean, I understand tripping and stuff, and that's scary, but I'd rather run one off its transom than off its bow eye.
For sure.
You know, so that, anyway, it's just what reminded me when you were saying putting the twins on the 24, you get a lot of ass lift. I dealt with that, man.
Well, you had little props then, so you weren't getting as much ass lift as you were getting the whole boat up.
Right.
And no pad, straight hard V.
Yeah, looking for something to run on.
If it was choppy enough, we had enough water going up the boat, it wasn't bad. But if it was a little flat, the thing, there's nothing holding it up there.
Right.
And, you know, like Joey Detour, he'd get in and drive it. Say, see, John, how easy it was?
Yeah, well, they found with the 24 moving the motors further apart was better than tighter
actually,
together.
that was the other weird thing. Same even on the 30, though, when we tried, putting them as close as you could.
Narrow boat, you're better off with them spread wider.
It turns out with them spread apart.
Why do you think? You think just because it helps catch it? It doesn't have so much room to fall?
Maybe that's it. It's holding the boat because they're out. The base of the drive is further out from the V than getting everything in the center and having it. Plus
right, and the counter rotation, having them a little spread to where a narrow boat, maybe the left and the right.
Remember when Mercury Marine? Remember when Mercury Marine said you don't need counter rotation? Okay. Sorry I said that, Mercury. Swearing, why would you need a boat with counter rotation? Because you don't make one. That's why you.
Right. Well, you see it in some other examples. You see people try. Anybody who's been to a boat race, the one thing you immediately notice is everybody mounts their trim tabs different. Right.
Well, we didn't used to.
Yeah, I did it every which way. The angle's the best way I found personally. And I'm not, but I've put them every which way. And then I find if you put them straight, you don't have them in the right spot. You got to ride with it like this for it to even stop. Well, then you get in a bad spot, and
Well, so we tried it in the Phantom. We were thinking, you keep them closer to the center of the boat, then, not for a normal boat. You
shouldn't need as much.
Right. Like for a normal boat where the hull's in the water, it's different. But for a boat where at 92, 93, you're running on the bullet a little lower, we figure if you put them on the outside of the boat, you got to drop them so much further before they hit the water that now they're actually... Now they're like brakes because you got them so far down, whereas in the middle, it's closer to the water. The boat doesn't have as much room.
Yeah, and then other guys would try not put them with the whole V, so when they closer in and out,
well, that's they would be
just touching the water. If they'd be just touching the water instead of an angle them, and they would hold the boat. No, not in the end. We ended up all the way out the side.
Where you're talking about
meeting the V.
I found where mine. I'd bring the boat to where it worked, and I realized the thing is down like this, and I'm like, this is no good.
No, and I got to tell you, I think you're right. Like, through trying it, see, when we got the Fountain was an interesting deal where, really, we wound up with that boat because Reggie was afraid my dad and my brother were going to die. They were running that little 32-foot Viper, and they ran in Class 3, which was 90 miles an hour. My brother in Marathon, Florida, got bored and was beating everybody and decided he was going to try and catch the Jet Ranger helicopter that Reggie Fountain was in. So now he's running 102, 103, breaks out, Carbonell had enough of my dad and my brothers. People don't understand. My old man and my brother were a nuisance when they first got into sport. We weren't the nice, proper people
Especially
we are now.
with Carbonell, because he was screwing you, so you tried to do what he was trying to screw you out of. You tried to get back.
Well, what was funny was Carbonell put us in class 2, which at the time was boats like that Polio Tropical, if you remember that, and that 47 Apache, and even they couldn't catch that Viper. So Carbonell was like pissed. Like he thought we were going to learn a lesson. We're smoking them too. So Reggie in Miami Beach, in I believe 2004, was flying over his fountains. And at the time, if you guys know, but for people listening, if you want to transport yourself back to that time, there would be 25 fountains there.
Right.
I mean, he'd have 38s, 35s, 42s, cut downs, and they were everywhere. I mean, they just littered the pits. So he's flying over his fountains, watching how his boats are running.
Right.
And well, here comes this fucking psycho machine 32 Viper mowing them all down in like 10 footers in Miami. Back then, if you remember, the big trophy was the overall winner of the day, right?
They gave those back then.
And at the time, that was like your Bacardi Silver,
Right.
right? Like the big 46 skater would be the overall, right?
Right.
Well, it was the 32 Viper that day in 10 footers, you know? So Reggie walks up to my old man with his typical Reggie, I build the fastest, safest, most outperforming fountain power boat, And he gives my old man the spiel, and he goes, you know what? I'm realizing this isn't going to work on you. I fly over my fountain power boats every race. Today, I flew over your boat figuring we were going to be fishing you out of the water at any moment, So he calls my old man a week later. David Knight had been campaigning our boat as, I believe, Invesis was the boat. And David Knight made a deal with Reggie, sold it to my old man. So when we got it, that was Reggie's boy. Like, David was his guy, So our boat was done as well as they could possibly do it. I mean, it had all the tricks in it, So when we got it, we're figuring these are like the geniuses, right?
He gave it to you?
No, but, there's a difference between...
I mean, it'd be nice if he would have...
But there's a difference between selling something to somebody, and that he gave us what he sold us.
Such a deal.
What he sold us had so much R&D already in it that it was almost, you couldn't put a price tag on that, at the time, and we're thinking, well, this is set up by these brainiacs at Fountain, this has to be.
Well, it probably had the good motors in it.
Right.
The special motors.
Yeah.
So we go putting a set of stock 525s in this thing and go down the river. We're like, fucking thing don't run 90. So they spent, I don't know how much time my brother spent in that thing, cutting how many hundreds and hundreds of pounds of unnecessary wiring and hollowing shit out and getting it down to fighting weight, And really that's where we learned a lot. And those tabs in that boat are exactly like you're saying, out on the outside, on the angle of V, like
That's where they always were in the beginning. That's where everybody put them.
and not for nothing, but that was right. I mean, every other combination we've tried since just doesn't seem to work. Everybody's got their own opinion. Like, you'll never convince anybody of it. But
I don't see
know
anybody
on our
doing them
boat.
anymore, though.
I know
I don't
on
see any
our
of the
boat.
ones all the way in anymore on anybody's boat. Everybody went back to, where they used to be?
they work.
Put them out there.
Yeah, we've had them in 20 different places. I go right back to the old style on the angle.
Right.
As far out.
Well, I think I don't. Shit. You got any more questions?
I do have one question.
Shoot away. Not just because I'm sitting here.
This is for John Jr. So, with your dad being the inventor and creator of Superboat, it was clearly inevitable for you to be involved in powerboats. But how exactly did you get involved in racing?
How did I get involved?
We raced in the
Manufacturers.
right.
Well, I have been going to races since, I was
yeah.
a kid.
But he had other projects he was involved in. But then we made the manufacturer's boat.
Yeah,
And he started racing with me. And then we had the manufacturer's challenge we raced. And after that, we've been racing.
I
Right.
can help you answer that one.
Yeah.
Tell me who the guy in the middle is.
Oh, that's you? No way. That's awesome. All right. That answers my question right there.
John grew up just like I did. We
Yep.
didn't have a fucking choice. We were going to be doing this shit one way or
And
another.
there's a picture when he was a kid. We were out in the boat.
Yeah, little John.
Oh, my goodness.
So I can help John answer that question. You like same way I did. You just grow up around it, and your brain. It's funny how your mind works. Like do you remember ever being like super interested in anything else?
No, well, well, I was always at the races, but I never thought of it, because I grew up at Fire Island a lot and stuff. But, for me being in these boats my whole life, it made it easy for me to get in it because I already had felt the boat, from being in them all the time.
But
so
it's
I
like
picked it up easy.
But it's like you just said, it's easy. It's not like, kids today, when they go to high school or something and they get involved in whatever after school activities or whatever, there's no real, like, passion's not there yet. That's built over time, right? Like, you see a kid, he watches a football game, and he goes, oh, I'm going to be an NFL football player. Well, that kid's got 15 years of hard work and a lot of luck in front of him before that dream's ever realized.
Yeah, and a 1 in a million you're ever going to get past.
Right.
Even getting a ride to college.
Right. Where look at the look at the athletes that are on these football teams. What other sport can a guy like me and John go play? We don't have the academics to go to college, and we aren't exactly good for anything other than sitting on a park bench and making sure it don't move. So we went to the only thing that was suited for us was stuff like, it's you go through life, and like for me, I didn't have this ultimate goal of being some big boat racer. I'm probably much like you, where it was just something that you felt like you had to do. Right. You grow up around it, you grow up in it. It's easy. It's sitting there. Not easy as in the work's easy. Easy as in it's an obvious choice. It's you spend 15, 20 minutes around boat racers, and it's apparent where the passion comes from. We all feel the same way. We all do the same thing. Right. We get up, you walk around the pits, and you think like 80 teams are here this weekend. It's got to be like 80 different people. We're all the same goddamn person. We all think the same way. We all do the same thing. We argue with each other. We fight with each other. 10 minutes goes by. We're best friends. We're at the bar. We're all the same. And like for John, where John grew up with this, I grew up with this, and I can understand how easy that transition is. It's not, you lose sight of what like today we would call like a silly goal. Like I don't know. Like I didn't want to be the shooting guard for the New York Knicks or anything. You know what I mean? I just wanted to go boat racing, and you just do it. It's something and I say it all the time. I've said it on this show probably 1,000 times. You can't just do one. Like, it's not something that you do and you check off a bucket list. If you do it once, you do it forever. Right. And even if you're not doing it at a sanctioned event, like at an OPA race or something, you're on the bay trying to beat everybody out there. It's, it just comes with the territory when you grow up with knuckleheads like this guy.
I had my first 1610, I think. I had my 16 with the teak side console in it, and the bench seat. Remember my blue 16?
Yeah,
with
I'm
the
just
70 on it. I think it was like 10. So like you're saying, I was always trying to run people on the bay and stuff,
It just comes with the territory.
Right.
Not only that, the beauty of the boat, especially when you're young, you can't get a driver's license.
Right.
But you can drive around any goddamn kind of boat you want to.
Right.
And you can go, I mean, like me, the whole boat life was, I was in a boat. Like when I switched to days and nights and days and nights, and then it got to be more nights than days because you worked on the weekend, you went to Fire Island at 5 o'clock. That's the party was starting.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to party over there.
Being a boater definitely grows you up
had a
fast,
whole, you had a whole world that you could go to with other crazy people, just as crazy as you.
Right.
Not necessarily in a boat, just the lifestyle that came with that boat. You could go, the beauty of it, especially when the speeds went up. I tell people, if you were going to Montauk, why would you want to get in a car? Oh, my boat, then get the boat, you jump in the car, and you go to Montauk.
Right.
You don't sit on the expressway for 3 hours.
Right. Well, and there's a whole other side of it, too, where you'll see a lot of boat racers are lifelong kind of deals where they grew up around it. And I think a lot of that is, too, it's not every day you find a Brent who picks it up pretty quick. It's kind of something that you do have to have some time in. Like, and I'm not saying you had to be born into it, but guys that have a clear advantage. Like myself, I grew up in the wrong time where by the time I was a kid, the laws had all changed. You couldn't even ride a jet ski until you were 16, 17.
I know now.
Right. So Like, whereas, like, look at the advantage my brother had. Like, I had the opportunity, and we've had a million conversations about this. I think my brother's probably one of the more talented racers I've ever seen. And really where that comes from is much like yourself, where he had a checkmate, a 17-foot checkmate when he was 5 years old.
Right.
You know, so, like, he was out banging around in something he probably shouldn't have been. But,
Right.
you know, I mean, it comes with the territory.
The beauty of it was there were no rules about that. Like, I had that little homemade boat in Great River. I was 14 years old. I had all kinds of boats before that because I always had a boat.
Right.
And a barge that was going to the dumps. My grandfather got it floating. I pushed it up and down in the back end of that river until I got to the next boat. But the whole idea of having your own boat, I mean, you're going to, how many kids you know have their own boat?
Right.
Me. I had an 8-foot pram I used to keep in a friend's backyard. I went out every day in that boat. If I wasn't at my grandparents' house, their own boat, I was at the other place with the other boat. The famous Sandy Island. There was a little island right in the river we live in. Not a river, it's actually a canal. So all the kids in town that had little boats, you went to Sandy Island, right? And a built-in diving board. We boated around, you know, crazy John Ferrara jump overboard and swim and catch his boat, you know. You don't tell your parents you're doing that crap, but nobody's going to stop you.
Right.
And then you get a bigger boat, now the bay, you know, like I went from the river to the bay. I'd been on the bay, but now I had my own boat,
Right.
you know, like a whaler. I mean, it's rough, but in a whaler, in a bay, you can go anywhere.
Right.
There's not a place in that 25-mile-long bay that you can't go. If you want to go there, you get in that whaler, you can go there. So now this whole world is yours.
Right.
Who would ever want to stop that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's contagious.
Yeah. And
It
the
is.
faster you went, you said, want to go to Davis Park for a cocktail? It's 25 miles. Yeah, good. We'll be there in 2 minutes. You know, it's...
Well, think about, like, how many
My
of
father
your...
had a boat. When I was a kid, we had a boat. You know how fast it went? 7.
Right.
28-foot, 1928 Richardson. Crossing the bay in that thing was an odd, you know.
What about when he had the sailboat?
Well, when I was a kid, right after the war, my father and his friend who married my mother's sister, they had like an 18-foot sailboat.
Take you a week to get across the bay.
It had no motor.
If the wind's good. Yeah.
It had no motor. No outboard, no nothing. You sailed. When you left the canal, you tacked out to get out in the bay. On a nice day, we'd make it to Kismet in probably, I don't know, an hour and a half, so, 7 miles. They'd stay in the bar at night. The sun go down. You know what happens when the sun goes down? The wind dies. You could see the bar on the other side of the bay. My father saying, we're going to make it for last call. Last call, 2 o'clock. You know what time we got home, right? 4 a.m.
When you had to catch the school bus.
No, this was summer. Next morning, though, you're right back down at the dock, right in that boat. I mean, I crossed the bay a million times in a sailboat.
Right.
But you learning about the water.
Right.
You got to learn everything because you're in a sailboat.
Listen, I've had this conversation. I laugh. Like, the general consensus is that the power boaters and the sailboaters don't get along.
Oh, boy.
But I got to tell you, I've been on a couple sailboats. I'm not saying I have any real experience. It doesn't look easy. And,
It's a whole nother world.
and guys like my old man, where he grew up on Long Beach Island, he would be sailing Hobie Cats and stuff all the time. And he'd tell me, like, it ain't easy. Like, they sailed, him and his buddies one day took him from the backside of LBI and sailed all the way around it in one day, right? That was their mission for the day, right? And he's like, dude, it was worse than any offshore powerboat race I've ever been involved in. You know, it ain't easy. I give a lot
Really
of
good
credit.
when the bugs come.
Oh, yeah. It's not my thing. Like, it's not my cup of tea. I just like...
I never, my father, we used to do some sailing. He belonged to a club they call the Frostbite Club. You sailed in the winter.
Right.
You had a bunch of boats at this club. You went down and sailed in the winter. We used to do that in the winter because there's nothing else to do, right?
Right.
At least you had wind.
Yeah, and also you learn, like I was a kid, so he said, okay, the next race, it's a little race around. He says, okay, the next race, you'll handle the tiller. I'm telling him, sheet in. Because it's winter. A little too much, you flip this boat over and you go swimming in the middle of winter. Not really a fun thing.
Right.
But right away, he says, you're here to win this race, aren't you? I said, yes, I am. I said, yes, I am. Yeah, you're pushing. You hardly know what you're doing, but you already tell me, tighten up on the main sheet a little bit. There's a guy right over here. We can get, right away. Almost
It's not
flipped it a couple
ramming.
times, he'd go around and say, well, we don't want to go swimming today. I said, I'll take the risk.
Right.
I want to try to beat this guy. It was right there, right away.
I'll race anybody, man. It's. I'll tell you a funny one. I boat right there by biking all the time, right? I'll tell you actually second most embarrassed I've ever been in my life. I'm in this little 21 Checkmate. I boat around on the weekends, right? So I'm coming in the river, and there's a big 80 Viking rolling in, right? I'm like, I could beat him. And I have to beat him because people don't understand our mentality. It's not like somebody else calling me a pussy. Right. I'm calling me a pussy. Like, if I don't beat him, I'll never live with myself, right? So I'm hauling ass, hauling ass for a stock little 21 Checkmate, right? Like 61, 62, right?
That Viking went faster than that?
Right by me. Like I was standing still.
Over 60 miles an hour?
Beat me. No, he had a line. But he beat me in the cut, and he was probably running 30, 35, right?
I was going to say, if that thing's going 60, it must have 8 million horsepower.
Hey, Pop, we got these creeks like you guys do up there. Try passing one of those things.
Well,
it's got a 6-foot wake coming off the back of it.
I was going to say the famous wake story. In fact, one of the first deep V's that I rode in, even before the Florida deal, I was probably, I don't know, maybe 16, I guess. No, it was earlier. Some guy came over, a friend of a friend came, and he had an early deep V boat. I don't remember what it was, but it was a real deep V. And he says, you got to ride this boat. I was like, wow. We went down the State Channel. Here comes, like you're talking about, this big cruiser leaving a wave like the size of a mountain. Now, you're thinking the kind of boats we're all used to, right? We better come off plane and hit that thing. Nah. He hit that wake. We went past, like you said, waving at the guys on the bridge. Like you could have reached over and touched him. We came down. He says, I got to get a damn boat like this. This is me. And we landed and went by and went, whoa. These deep V's, I was telling my friends, these new deep V boats, man, we just jumped that thing 20 feet out of the water, came down. You're nuts, John, I know. But I'm going to do this. There's one more reason I got to do this.
So I got to tell you about something, too. All this hype that's coming out of Long Island right now. Like you were talking about jumping over wakes, and I'm laughing because I never saw wakes like the time I went to Long Island and boated around a little bit. I mean, you guys got some crazy shit going on out there between the ferries and
right in the bay.
Well, that day, what you're talking about, that happened to be when that wind picked up. There was 4 to 5 footers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that day can get ugly.
Yeah.
And the famous 24 guy says, everybody else thought they weren't going to go home that day, and you're 24, you just ride home in that stuff.
Right. Well, we're out there banging
But it's a
around.
little bigger than Barnegat.
What I think is really cool is there was probably 18 to 20 boats in that run we did. And that happens out here too, but it's the older crowd, the big money crowd. And we got to the bar there where the first stop was, and I'm looking around. It's all kids. And talking to these kids, they're not just kids that worked and got enough money to buy a boat. Right. They understand it. They're out every night playing with setup, finding props, figuring out what they can do to be a little faster.
Yeah, those guys go downtown to park.
Wednesday night.
They cracked me up with the new GPS deal, right? I did 97.256.
Right.
Yesterday I did 97.254. I gained 2/100ths of a mile an hour. Boy, you better go back and work on that thing a little more.
He took a piss before he got in that day. You know what's funny is, though, I got to tell you, the Wednesday night drags that they're doing is so cool. Like, I've been watching, they got trophies for the King of the Cut, which is this year is James Duranzik with the progression, like 94 miles an hour with a 300 XS on it, and it's so cool to see not just the youth involved, but educated youth. That they
ain't youths anymore, as they said, and most of those guys are in their 30s or 40s.
No, not 40s. They're probably 20 to 30.
I'd say some of them.
I don't know. I mean,
there
because
might be some older guys.
Maybe the boats are so old because the thing is, nobody's buying any boats from me.
Right.
The 21s used to be a young guy come in and buy a boat.
Yeah,
as
well,
the
there's a lot of
prices,
used stuff out
as
there.
the prices went up, it just priced them out of the world that
Well,
they
and
want to be in.
That's just an unfortunate aspect of today's world. Is
Yeah.
just, I mean, I talked to my old man about it a bit. My old man helped me out a lot in life. You know, just not necessarily handing me things, but at least handing me the tools to figure that
Well,
shit
you
out.
gotta be
you know?
when you're young. You gotta flip the boat upside down.
Well,
Your
you
old
know-
man buys you a new boat. Then
Yeah.
that's the only. I'll tell you the truth. That was the only way I was getting a new boat because all that other time I'd been saving money and making these boats and do that. When I flipped that little boat upside down, I said, "That's the end of that.
Right.
We're going down there and better buy a boat."
Right.
That's like when I abused him the first time to get a 3 horsepower. I abused him so bad one night. He finally went down to the Emerald dealer. You got a 3 horsepower? Yeah, $110. The old man says $100. It's sold. I said, "Thank you, God." I have my 8-foot pram now, my 3 horsepower. I'm back on the water.
Right. Well, what's cool about it is they're getting like the manufacturer wars of old going, you know, like, and it's so cool to see, like, you know, to me it's cool. Maybe to somebody it's getting annoying or whatever, but you got your superboat crowd, right? You got your progression crowd, you got your shadow crowd, you got your,
Right.
and yeah, they're all old boats and they've been
No,
rebuilt
it's
a million
great though that
times
they're
and-
putting them all back together. You know.
Well, they get mad at each other. You know, my boat's better than your boat. No, my boat's better. You know, Coen did this, or you know, Kevin did that, or
Right.
And what's cool is I sit back and I just laugh because to me, you're all wrong, yeah, or you're all right. Who the fuck
Right.
knows? But at the end of the day, there's a serious amount of passion.
Right.
There's, you know, those arguments.
Those are the deadly serious guys because really, that's the only time they ride in the boats.
Right. Is to go for real.
They don't go out on the weekends. You look on Fire Island, you go over there looking for any of those guys.
No.
Yeah. It's-
They're home working on the boat trying to get that extra 2/100ths of a
For
mile an hour
Wednesday.
out of the thing.
Right. And I gotta tell, like, you know, every once in a while I'll get somebody that like apologizes to me, like, I'm sorry if that that got out of hand or whatever. I love it. I love it. You know, because you sit back and is it a nuisance, all the arguing and bullshit and
Right.
everything else? Of course it is. But if you look at it for what it really is, they're not arguing for the sake of arguing. They're
No.
arguing because they really give a shit.
Yeah.
They really love this stuff. And there's something special.
It's better than sitting home playing on a computer all night.
Absolutely, you know, and there's something special about Long Island. It seems to be breeding these young kids that just love this shit, you know. And you know, maybe you're right. Maybe some of them are in their 20s, their 30s.
No, but young is good because once they're done, I don't see anything. You know.
Yeah, because the kids today aren't.
What are they gonna be racing in 10 years? They're gonna be racing on a computer,
Right.
You know, it's. You know, so it's so good to see. And, you know, I spent some time up there by you guys. I spent the weekend with Joe Riley. And just, you know, he put me in a truck and we go over to this person's house.
Right.
And you pull up in the driveway and right or wrong, hon, they got the A-frame cherry picker out there. You know, they're pulling the motors off the in the driveway. You know, the neighbors are bitching. They're running the impact guns at 2 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, but to me, it's cool because I saw that growing up. I understood that growing up. And to me, that's part of life now. That's just not even a
The
question.
weird thing is, I think about now is with the next step they're talking about this new. What do they call it? Where the
Virtual
Oh,
reality.
yeah.
virtual reality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the word.
I can see the point where it'll get so real that you'll be able to sit home and go boat racing.
Don't worry, we'll be dead.
Yeah, there'll be some guys.
Oh, that's what are you kidding? That guy came over to the house one day. Had this porno.
Well, I bought those for Richard.
This kid had
Well, they're
this porno.
you know
this
those.
porno.
What are those? Those
Oculus.
those.
Yeah, but the next
You know,
phase
they have the
now that's
screen
coming
on
out,
them. They're like glasses. They're virtual
Right.
glasses. They're like
This
500
guy came over to the
bucks.
house with this porno thing.
My father was like,
You would think you're sitting there looking at that thing, winking at
"Oh
it.
my God, it's fake."
Now, if you could put it, so,
You had to chase them down the street to
Yeah.
get them back.
if you could get it so real where a guy could sit there and feel like you're actually in the room in that boat doing that stuff, these kids will never leave.
He
They'll
thought the
sit in their room and
20-year-old
die.
women liked him again.
Right.
They'll be sitting in their room until they starve to death because they won't want to stop whatever they're doing.
I don't know, man. I
For
hope
you
not.
and me, it wouldn't. But I see my grandson now.
Yeah, my son does a
Sit
lot
in
of
that
gaming.
room for
Oh,
8 hours. You
Yeah,
can't.
but-
We're going out in the boat. Nah, I don't want to go.
What are they going to do with boat racing on a video game? Somebody going to stand behind you and kick you in the back every time?
Well, that's it. the only thing that won't be real about it is getting rammed.
Right.
But I mean, it'll be so close where you look like the boat is going to touch you. I mean, you look like you could touch the boat. They're talking about it now, this new phase of this thing that they're coming out with. They literally said that the way these kids are, they might sit in a room and starve to death because it'll be so real, they won't want to stop.
Right.
I mean, it's already that way with the stupid games they're playing.
Yeah,
You
but
know
those
what's
are
pretty
way
cool
young.
though is you watch. There's something to it on another level. There's something to it. Like the Formula One guys, they have these simulators,
Right.
That they sit and they train in,
Yeah.
that are as real as running
Yeah.
a
Well,
real
that's
car.
the F1 guys.
Yeah,
dude.
and don't get me wrong. I mean, one of those simulators probably cost $1 million.
Well,
but
this stuff, that's the killer. This stuff, I always wanted to, I saw about landing a jet on a carrier on the ball, where the ball moves. Mm-hmm. So I met guys in Fort Lauderdale the year we were racing there because they're all on leave. And I'm talking to the guy. I said, any of you guys fly? You try landing on the ball? Guy goes, you know about that landing on the ball? I said, yeah, I watched that. I didn't do it. One guy says, I'm up in Jacksonville as my court. I'll get you in the trainer.
did you do it?
No, I didn't do it.
Ah, you
But
should've
you know
did
what
it.
he said to me? When that plane crashes and you're in that simulator,
scares the
you
shit out
think
of you?
you're dead. He said, it is that you think you're dead.
Right.
I said, "Oh." Now, if they make it that real where every schmo can sit home and fly a jet or race in a boat, they'll never leave their room.
Right.
They'll have to wear diapers and just shit in their pants and don't leave a minute from the screen.
Well, they won't be any different from most of us then. By the
Yeah.
time that shit comes out.
Yeah, we'll be too old to have a real boat. We'll need the simulator then. Put my 80-year-old body, my 90-year-old body, sit me down, strap me in, and let me go.
You're almost there, kid.
Yeah, I'll be close. I'm getting closer every day.
Well, I'm out of questions. Is there anything you guys want to push? Anything you want to know?
Great time. Thanks for having us, man.
No, man.
Yeah,
Listen,
this was great.
Thank you for coming
Some
down.
guy, it's nice to talk to a guy like us who's been in, like you say, it's in your blood. You couldn't imagine doing anything else.
It is. People ask me all the time, I don't make any money doing this show or anything like that. And people ask me, why do you do it? Like, this shit ain't cheap. And people are like, why are you doing all I have more fun doing this. I could care less if anybody ever watches this. It's just a good excuse to hang out with you guys and bullshit for a little while with normal people,
when
or people I consider normal people.
I went to college in Florida, and of course, school is not my forte. The first thing we learned about down there, we're out driving them out, my roommate and I, we see a spring. You ever see the springs? The water is as clear as air.
Really?
It's clear, and it's always 70 degrees.
No shit. Oh, a hot spring.
No, a regular spring,
Right.
which Florida's full of.
Okay.
So we say, maybe we can call on our parents to send us some money and buy some scuba tanks. So I started cave diving in Florida. So I came back. I was working at I thought I was going to be in that business. But when I got hooked on I was boating, but when I got hooked on the racing, cave diving's an adventure, but boat racing's better.
Not quite like that. Yeah. No.
Oh, yeah. Well, next time you go somewhere in Florida, go find
Yeah, you go
someplace.
up to like Wiki Wachi River.
Go
up in
any of
there.
the, I'm telling you, it is the weirdest thing because, like, when you dive in the ocean, right, the deeper you go, it gets cold. You need
Right.
a spring is 72 degrees.
Right.
All the time, everywhere. You go down 100 feet, it's 72 degrees.
Right.
You go down anywhere, so you got no equipment. You put on a tank and you go.
Right.
You got the rope in your hand, though,
Right.
to find your way out of the cave.
Right.
Now, of course, you've seen the things on TV where they put on all this equipment and they swim miles into these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
We never made it miles. So one time I almost made it too far, but I ran out of air on the way back. But, I mean, you're swimming in water that is as clear as this room.
Right.
It's kind of another adventure.
Well, we were pretty close to that. You would dig this if you're into diving. Last year, or is it? Last year. I guess it is now. It's after January. We went diving in September in Guadalupe Island, which is 240 miles off the coast of Mexico.
Nice spot.
Yeah, it was a 26-hour ride to get there. We got there. We were cage diving with great whites.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's cool.
And it was pretty wild. I mean, the whole experience of the sharks is amazing.
Why'd you have to go so far?
It's a pretty particular place. See, great whites don't really stay in one place for too long, but for whatever reason,
They're there.
this is a hot spot. Yeah. So you're maybe 200 feet from the rocks of this island, right? But you're in 1,000 feet of water. I mean, it's unbelievable. So they back.
Yeah, I shouldn't ask you why, because I did a lot of crazy shit diving. See, when I got north, the adventure up north was wreck diving.
Right.
So
right.
there's some of that. You ride 7 hours in the boat, right? You get 8 minutes
bit
or
of
10.
bottom
You
time.
get 8 or 10 minutes bottom time in 130 feet of water. You decompress one stop, and it's over in 7 hours back.
Right.
People say, you did what?
Yeah.
For where?
Well, this was pretty neat. They back you right up to the island, right?
Yeah.
So the guy told me, I said, what's the visibility? Because the water's gorgeous, And he goes, we figure we got 100 feet of anchor line out. So, or anchor chain out. So he goes, if you can see the chain, or it's 100 feet all total, it's like 50 to the chain and then 50 to the anchor in chain. So he goes, depending on what you can see, that's pretty much your visibility. We got down there the first day. You could see the anchor in the ground.
Oh, yeah.
That's how clear the water
Yeah.
was. And, I mean, I'll tell you, you want to talk about eerie. One of those great whites, just one is impressive. But to be surrounded by 12 or 13 of them
And
is...
you got the other freaks that don't do in the cage. They go
they're
swim
nuts.
with.
I'm telling you right now.
They're more nuts than us. Because I
Either-
watch those guys swim around with sharks.
Either they're totally
cage.
Either they're totally out of their mind, or it's their first time.
And they're stupid.
Because it's the only way. Because if you've seen them once, you'll never even think twice about getting back in a cage. You'll never get out of the cage. They're incredibly powerful, but what's most amazing is at 13, 14 feet long, they're as nimble as a little tuna.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the eerie thing is they can literally disappear. Like, they'll be right in front of you, right? You'll see this shark swim by, and now you're always kind of looking around you because you know one's behind you, right? You'll turn back, and that shark's gone. And then you'll sit in that cage for 20, 30 minutes, and there won't be anything, right? Just dead sea.
He's off deciding how we can get in the cage and eat you.
He's sitting just outside of how he knows how far you can see, watching you. You know, maybe one of these knuckleheads will fall out of that cage or something, and then in a blink of an eye, it's right here.
I know.
Yeah.
It
All
just
that diving I did, I had no desire. Guys say, oh, we can go over here. It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't need to swim with the sharks.
But pretty cool shit, man.
I swim with the sharks when I go do business.
Right.
The New York Sharks. They don't kill you. They just take your wallet.
The New York Sharks, the Philly Lawyers,
Yeah,
the Jersey
right.
Crooks. Well, listen, guys, I really appreciate you taking your time
Hey,
to come
this was
down
great.
here. I love listening to the story, man, and I'm happy that maybe more people will know what a legendary brand Superboat is, man. And I know you laugh because you guys are some of the modest guys I know, but you really have built up a name for yourself in this sport, and your work and the performance of your boat speaks volumes. You don't have to do it; they speak for you. And I wish you guys the best. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming down.
Thank you.
It's Offshore Live 18. Thanks, people.